Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Gate of Babylon High School DxD. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AbyssEater and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Celebrations could be heard all over the place as shinobi from each village were exchanging words with each other. Some could be seen hugging or even crying on the shoulder of their comrades. The reason for their celebrations, why grown men were crying, some out of happiness while others out of sadness, was because this exact moment marked the end of the Fourth Shinobi War. Between them a blond boy who appeared to be around 17 looked around, an unreadable expression on his face as he remembered how all this started. A war that has claimed more casualties than any war before. The reason for the war was because of a group that called themselves Akatsuki. It was a group that was originally founded back then during the Third Shinobi War. It was a small group of orphans who had created the concept of Akatsuki as a way to bring peace to their small home country called Amigekyo, which often got caught into the crossfire during one of the many conflicts of the five great nations. Land of Earth, Land of Water, Land of Lightning, Land of Wind, Land of Fire. That were the names of the five great nations, each of which held a shinobi village. Land of Earth had Iwagakure. Land of Water had Kirigakure. Land of Lightning had Kumogakure. Land of Wind had Sunagakure. And Land of Fire had Kanahagakure. Since the start of shinobi villages, these five villages withheld the balance of power throughout the elemental nations. That didn't go without conflict, however. Over the years that the villages have existed, various wars had been held. Some small and some were large. The larger ones were given the name of Shinobi World War. Amigekyo, which as the name suggests is constantly covered by rain. For a long time it was protected by the legendary Hanzo of the Salamander, whose battle prowess was known throughout the elemental nation. He was so powerful that shinobi would flee on sight whenever he was spotted. However, over the years he lost his conviction. His dream for Amigekyo to someday be basked in the sun became less and less until it was just gone. He became dull, he stopped honing his skill and focused on preserving his power. It wasn't until later though when he was approached by Danzo Shimura, a veteran of Konoha, who managed to convince him that they, the Akatsuki, were planning on overthrowing him. Teaming up with him, they managed to hold Konan, one of the original members of the Akatsuki, hostage and offered to release her in trade for Yahiko, the boy who started and led the Akatsuki his life. Yahiko, who was often described as selfless, wasted no time and impaled himself on the kunai his friend, Nagato, was holding. Both in an attempt for freedom and because he didn't want to burden him with his death while also trusting their dream of peace onto him. This event, however, also marked the day a new Akatsuki started. One that shook the entire shinobi world to its core. Bijou, often also called chakra monster, are gigantic chakra constructs in the shape of animals with different number of tails. They were originally created a long time before ninja villages started by the Sage of Six Paths when he separated the Jubi. They were originally created not just to prevent resurrection of the Jubi, but also as a means to create peace and keep the balance. Over the centuries, however, humanity had failed to recognize these bijou as intellectual beings, instead seeing them as demons, mindless beasts, and feared them. Later on they were hunted as humans were greedy and recognized the immense power they held and of course wanted it for themselves. They were later on successfully captured by Hashirama Senju, Shodaime Hokage of one of the first ninja villages that existed. Unfortunately, however, Hashirama was a somewhat simple-minded man and had captured these bijou against their will, only for him to distribute them to other villages. It didn't take long for other nations to look for ways to add these bijou into their own arsenal. Unlike Hashirama, who was capable of calming them with his Mokotan, a Kekei Genkai that originated from the Senju clan. So they began to look for their own ways to harness the power of the bijou, which they did by sealing said bijou inside a human, creating what was called nowadays a Jinchuriki. Konoha didn't just have to worry from enemies from other villages, however. Madara Uchiha, legendary leader of the Uchiha clan who had founded Kanahagakure alongside his rival, Hashirama. While it started out well, it didn't last. With Hashirama being chosen as Hokage, the leader of the village, Madara, became concerned with the future of the Uchiha clan. It became worse when Madara managed to decipher the stone tablet that had been in their possession for generations. On there he read about the history of shinobi, but also about the endless cycle of fighting and failed peace between the Senju and Uchiha. Also written on there was a solution to all the fighting between their clans, Mugen Tsukuyumi. With that in mind, Madara became more detached towards the village and started to lose trust with his own clan and Konoha itself. He defected before returning back to Konoha to challenge Hashirama, though he was not alone. With his Sharingan he managed to subject the Kyubi no Kitsune, the most powerful of the bijou, under his control. They fought each other to exhaustion, though even Madara together with the Kyubi failed against Hashirama himself, who, with much sadness, was forced to kill his childhood friend. The area they fought in would later be called the Valley of the End. Somehow, though, Madara survived. Having planned on using Izanagi, and Uchiha Kenjutsu, Madara had managed to rewrite reality and lived at the cost of his right eye and went in seclusion. Having obtained a sample of Hashirama's DNA, he implanted it. By combining his Uchiha DNA with Hashirama's Senju's, he managed to awaken the legendary Rinnegan, which would only further his plans he had of a world of peace. Tobi. He was known as the actual leader of Akatsuki, though that was kept a secret between Konan and Nagato. While during meeting between all the other Akatsuki members he acted as a fool, it was during meeting with Nagato and Konan he showed his full capabilities. Manipulating them under the guise of Madara Uchiha, who was later revealed to be his mentor, he controlled them using their fear of dealing with the legendary shinobi himself. Later on he had interrupted the Kage meeting where he introduced himself as Uchiha Madara. There he had explained his plan, Mugen Tsukuyumi, the ultimate genjutsu that would be projected onto the moon, which would put everyone in a dreamlike state. In there the person's deepest desires are fulfilled. Meaning children could be reconnected with their parents. Father and mothers could meet their children in pretty much any situation one could think of. He gave them one last offer, which was to hand over both the Kyuubi and Hachibi. Having been declined, he declared the Fourth Shinobi World War. They were surprised, however, as during the final moments of the war the masked man revealed himself to be Uchiha Obito. Having been forced to reveal his identity once news came through the real Madara Uchiha being revived using Edo Tensei. The surprise didn't end there though, as not too far away from him Yondaime Hokage could be seen hugging a red-haired woman and blonde-haired girl slightly younger than himself. He knew the redhead was his mother, Kushina Uzumaki, and the blonde girl apparently his sister, Nami Uzumaki Namikaze. It came as quite a shock for everyone in the alliance when news spread of the appearance of Namikaze Minato. It first began when a small squad of shinobi came across a small home in the forest surrounding Land of Rivers. Around the house were the scattered corpses from over 100 white setsu. What shocked them, however, were the three-pronged kunai that were scattered around the area. They immediately reported this to the HQ, where they began to worry about someone possibly knowing the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Those worries were for naught, however, as shortly after the arrival of missing Nin Uchiha Sasuke, another yellow flash accompanied him and showed the Namikaze Uzumaki family bar Naruto himself. He knew they were his family because he had met them inside his seal before. While most shinobi were happy to see them, even those from Iwagakure, some of Konoha, looked at them with disgust. One of them was Hitaki Kakashi, who was put under him with both Obito and Rin when they became genin. Actually, disgust would be undercutting it. He looked livid, as it was evident by his Sharingan, and spun with barely contained rage as he looked at someone they all thought to be dead. His sensei, the man that taught him it was important to cherish comrades. The man who took care of him when his father had killed himself was alive all this time, and had abandoned his son. His own flesh and blood. Minato had even the balls to greet him like nothing happened. The murderous aura Kakashi was releasing was enough to make even him back off. The Hokages that were brought back with Edo Tensei all glanced at him in shock. Even the Sandaime Hokage who had given Minato his position was ashamed by the actions of his successor. While Hashirama could only shake his head, commenting how disappointed Mito would be if she would look at Kushina now. Kakashi along with the others glanced at Naruto, curious as to what his reaction was to seeing his supposedly dead family alive and well. All while he was struggling to survive when he was younger. They were both alarmed and frightened by his lack of reaction. For someone like Naruto, who's usually very vocal with whatever he did, kept surprisingly quiet. If anything, the blank expression he wore was more worrying, as no one has ever seen the side of the usual hyper-blonde. How pathetic, he muttered as he looked at the celebrating shinobis around him. His words, despite being spoken to himself, seemed to travel through the clearing as one by one the shinobi stopped celebrating and turned to look in his direction. He glanced around, taking in the expressions of his family, who were unable to keep eye contact when they met. His blue eyes that were filled with life were dull as he gazed at them, which added to his already impassive facial expression. Are you that disgusted with yourself that you can't even look me in the eye, Namikaze Minato? His words prompted the man in question to look up. Guilt visible in his eyes. Naruto. Yes, that is my name. His voice remained uninterested as he continued to look around. He spotted Kakashi, who seemed to be having trouble between choosing to glare at Minato and look at him with worry. His gaze met the rest of the rookies, each of them looking at him with worry with the exception of Sasuke, who seemed to be waiting for something. Oh son of a bitch, he knows. Their eyes met, and for a split second Naruto let a smug smirk grace his features before it was gone. Had it been anyone else, Sasuke would have thought he imagined it, but with his Sharingan active he indeed spotted the smirk, and could tell that despite his eyes showing absolute boredom there was something else. Almost like he was waiting for something. I had enough of this. Your presence is making me feel unwell. He spoke up. The shinobi around him looked at him and his father with confusion as they didn't understand what he was implying. With a snap of his fingers, Naruto's body was covered with a golden glow, getting them to focus their attention back to him. When the glow disappeared, they all looked at the new form of Naruto Uzumaki, who had his eyes closed. A few shinobi blinked before holding out a hand sign and calling out Kai, as if what they were looking at was a genjutsu. The reason for that was because Naruto's previous outfit, his tattered orange pants with black and orange jacket, was no longer there. No, in place of it he was wearing a white jacket with a fur color which was left open, allowing everyone to see his chest that was chiseled to perfection. It wasn't like the Raikage, who looked like a muscle-bounded freak. It seemed to fit the rest of his body perfectly. Added to that, he wore black jeans held together by a black belt with a golden buckle. Topping it off, his sandals were replaced by black dress shoes. His outfit wasn't the only thing that had changed, however. He seemed to have gotten older, not a whole lot, mind you, just a year or two. With also got taller, as his previous 5 feet 5 inches was replaced by his current 5 feet 11 inches. His face that was shaped after Kushina had gotten sharper and was now mimicking Minato's, and the whisker marks on his cheeks were no longer there. His blonde hair kept its color, though it was slicked back slightly. "And Naruto, is that you?" Minato stammered, as he too was shocked with the change his estranged son underwent. In reply, he opened his eyes, and shocking them once more as they had changed. Gone were the cerulean blue eyes, and in place of them, staring straight at him, were blood-red ones. Minato had to fight back the urge to shudder, as those eyes seemed to stare right into his soul. He wasn't the only one, as his wife and daughter next of him felt the same. It was as if they were the prey and he was the predator with the way his eyes gazed upon them. The air around his son had changed as well. Whereas before he excluded warmth, compassion, and was overall inviting, now, though it was cold and empowering, he felt the need to submit the longer he looked at him. "Of course I am. Is a mongrel such as yourself incapable of recognizing your own flesh and blood?" His voice held a certain amount of arrogance as he mocked him. Then again, it wouldn't be surprising. Minato flinched as his words hit home hard. A part of him wondered what happened the way he was speaking, but ignored it in favor of asking the question everyone was curious about. "Son, what happened to you?" "What happened, you ask? I wonder if I should tell you along with the rest of these peasants." The shinobi close to him bristled and were about to retort before his gaze landed on him, effectively stopping whatever nonsense would come out of his mouth. "I guess I have time to inform you all." He looked at his wrist only for nothing to be there. Snapping his fingers once more, a watch appeared and he looked at it. Soon he thought before the air behind him shimmered golden. The shinobi around him raised their guard in preparation for what might come as it began to ripple. No one was prepared, as the surrounding shinobi watched in awe as from the ripples a strange flying contraption came into view. It looked to be made out of pure gold, and had green wings. They watched as he jumped high in the air as the contraption began to move itself underneath him without someone controlling it. As he came down, he landed right on the throne and leant his head on his fist. "Impressive, no?" He smiled as he watched their awe-filled gazes while floating above them. Such an amazing treasure. He chuckled as he sat comfortably on the throne that was placed on it. "So you want to know how this," he mentioned to himself, and the contraption that he was seated on, came to be? Minato nodded. "I guess it wouldn't hurt to tell, though I doubt you'll be able to comprehend what I'm about to tell." He ignored their glares. "It started all those years ago when we were sent on a mission to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke, who ran his fist through my chest." He ignored his mother and sister's shocked expression as he began to tell his story. "I remember like it was yesterday." Flashback. Blue eyes opened as they stared at the bland ceiling of what he recognized as the location to head towards the seal was. "How did I get here?" Naruto asked himself as he tried to remember what caused him to end up here. Then he remembered. They were called in the Hokage's office, where they were told Sasuke, his friend and teammate, had left the village for Orochimaru. Their team consisted out of Niji, Kiba, Shikamaru, Choji, and himself. As they got closer, they had to deal with the Sound Four, Orochimaru's elite bodyguard, who were capable of using the curse mark. The closer they got, the less people they traveled, as they had left one of them behind to fight one member of the Sound Four. Lee had come in just in time to deal with the Kagaya member, leaving him to face Sasuke alone. Throughout their fight, they were pretty even power-wise. That was until Sasuke used the curse seal, forcing him to use power of the Kyuubi. The rest of the fight was hazy, as he couldn't quite remember everything due to him using the power his tenant. The last thing he remembered was Sasuke's hand through his chest. Immediately panicking, Naruto opened his jacket only to see nothing there. Weird. He began to walk towards the location he could sense the bijou at. Despite not being a censor, it was almost impossible to miss the malicious intent the beast radiated. "You. This is your fault." "Huh, what do you mean my fault, you baka kitsune?" Naruto replied with a scowl as he glared at the towering beast. "Silence, you flesh bag. Because you weren't careful, that Uchiha brat rammed his fist through your chest." That was real?" he asked dumbly. If it wasn't for the fact that he was dying, he would have face-bombed. "Of course it was real. You're dying because of your mistake, and when you die I'll die, so how about a deal?" The fox gave him a smile. A deal? Yes, brat, a deal. You free me and I'll bring the Uchiha run to Konoha. You're already dying, so there is nothing to lose. Why should I trust you? You've been trying to take over my body since the start, he said as he pointed at the massive kitsune. Brat, why would I lie now that you're already dying? I'm surprised you aren't as upset as I thought you'd be. But I'll give you my word as a demon that I will save your Uchiha friend from Orochimaru. Naruto was silent as he looked at his hands. I'm really dying, I guess I can free you then. You promise to save Sasuke? The fox nodded and watched with a smile as Naruto reached up to the seal. Freedom, it was so close the fox could almost taste it. However, just before he was able to touch it, he was forced on his knees as an oppressive feeling weighed him down. He was barely able to lift his head, and what he saw shocked him. The massive fox before him, the Kyuubi, was forced flat on the ground as silver chains restricted its limbs. From where he was, Naruto could feel an unfamiliar energy coming of those chains, and so did the Kyuubi as its expression turned into fear. You! Impossible, what are you doing here? The Kyuubi exclaimed as it was scared for the first time since its creation. Naruto heard footsteps from behind him and tried to look around only to fail as the oppressive aura was still there. Ho? You're still conscious? I guess even a dog such as yourself has something to show. Though it is to be expected, being a descendant of me, Gilgamesh, the king of heroes after all. The male voice spoke with arrogance leaking with every word. The oppressive aura vanished, and Naruto was able to turn and look at the person that spoke to him. There, standing before him, was a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. Semi-long blonde hair a shade darker than his own that was slicked back. He wore golden armor that radiated power. Who are you? Naruto stammered as he looked at the man in awe. Watch how you address me, mongrel. You might be my descendant, but unless you have proven yourself, you'll address me with respect, someone higher than you deserve. He scolded the child as the man's red eyes bore into him. He was surprised, however, as the kid seemed to glare at him. Respect? I only respect those who deserve it, and I don't even know who you are, so no. Respect is earned, not given. The moment he finished his rant, the oppressive aura from before returned, only this time even worse, as he lay flat on his face. Behind the man, the air rippled as numerous spears, swords, axes, and any weapon he could think of appeared. Instead of closing his eyes and accepting his fate, Naruto glared right at the older man. He was surprised to hear him chuckle as slowly the weapons retreated and the ripples closed themselves, a pleased smirk on his face. Most impressive, looking death in the eye, and even then you're still so rude. I guess I will grace you with the knowledge who I am, who you are, and what will happen next. As a golden throne materialized behind him. And so he began to tell his story, one about a king so great he became the king of heroes himself. Flashback end. And that is how it all began. He finished his explanation. Wait, so you're telling me that this Gilgamesh is your ancestor, which also makes him my ancestor? He got a nod in return. How come I never heard of him or that? He pointed at the flying contraption he was seated on. Naruto shrugged. I don't know, nor do I question it, as that's the way it works. Though I guess it does explain my crazy luck. He muttered to himself, recalling Gilgamesh's own golden rule in which he was fated to live a life filled with riches. It would also clear up some other things, such as how he's a genius during fights, as he unknowingly used thought acceleration whenever he would fight. Wait. Tsunade suddenly spoke, causing him to divert his attention to her. Yes, woman? Tsunade bristled. If what you say is true, then how come Jiraiya never brought up? Someone of his caliber would have noticed your change of attitude, not to mention the fact that you're now older. She looked him up and down. He tapped his chin. Perhaps if he wasn't busy visiting brothels and the likes, he might have. Though by then it would have already been too late. He added as an afterthought. What do you mean? She asked, knowing about her teammates' tendencies. It has to do with the reason I look older, as you call it. You see, my ancestor Gilgamesh didn't come from around here. He glanced around with disgust at the barren wasteland he was hovering over. He informed me about this. How do I say this? He shook his head. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a completely different world connected to this one. He chuckled as he spotted their incredulous looks. I see you don't believe me, not that I care. Anyway, after spending some time with that perverted fool, I came to realize that this training trip, if you could call it such, was going to be an absolute waste of my time. So I devised a plan. I made a clone and plopped a few enhancement seals on it to strengthen it, while also making sure it had a large amount of Bijou chakra in it. Once that was done, I made sure it had the same personality as the old me, as it would be quite suspicious for me to undergo such drastic change. Then I waited for the man to pass out, which, mind you, didn't took long. Once he passed out, I switched myself with the clone that had been tailing us for a few days and left. Having successfully left that perverted man behind, I started to travel, trying to look for any ways I can reach this world he spoke of. It wasn't long before I began experiencing a memory of sorts. In said memory it showed Gilgamesh himself using this. He motioned at the flying contraption he was sitting on. This flying contraption before you is called a vimana. It is said to be a way of traveling used by gods. Now while I have gotten quite arrogant due to Gilgamesh's influence, even I wouldn't go as far as to call myself a god. For now at least. With this I saw Gilgamesh enter our world centuries ago, which made me think. If he was able to enter our world using it, can I enter his world with it myself? He glanced around to see them all paying rapt attention and smirked. I could. The Vimana is one of the greatest treasures of the vault which, by right, are now mine. It moves at such speed it would make even you, Yandame Hokage, look like a snail in comparison. In fact, its speed, if so great, I can literally cause a rip in space and time when used to its fullest potential, he revealed, shocking them. Minato Namikaze was known throughout the nations as the fastest man, seconded by the Yandame Reikage himself. He fast so fast that the only thing one would see was a yellow flash, so they doubted what he was saying was true. Ah, I see you don't believe me. I guess a little demonstration wouldn't hurt any? And before their eyes, in less time it took them to blink, the spot he occupied was empty. The sound of his chuckling caused them to look up. Impossible! Were the thoughts of both Namikaze Minato and the fourth Reikage, who looked at him in shock. Even they, who have trained to both handle and spot insanely fast speeds, were unable to keep up with how fast he moved. Impressed, are we? He slowly hovered back to the spot he was at before. You should be. His voice turned surprisingly serious. It's not everyday mongrels such as yourself are treated to the sight of my treasures. You can't be him. You can't be my son, my Naruto-chan. Kushina yelled as she did her best to deny the person before them was her son. A son she abandoned to the dogs, but nonetheless. But I am. You know it. Your husband knows it. I know it. Hell, even Sasuke knows it. His words hurt her, though the latter managed to confuse her. What do you mean? He looked around to see who was it that spoke. He spotted the short pink-haired girl. Sakura was it. He glanced at her before rolling his eyes as he remembered the childhood crush his old self had on the girl. He was such a fool back then. You remember when we went to look for Sasuke, Sakura? It was you, Sai Yamato, and myself? She nodded, though wasn't sure where he was going with this. During our confrontation, Sasuke over there, he glanced at the dark-haired boy. Sasuke managed to enter my seal where he suppressed the QB. That was not the only thing he met in there, though. He chuckled. Oh no, you see, in there he met the real me. Not the dumb blonde kid that screamed about coming Hokage in a village that hated his guts. No, I have bigger ambitions than to sit behind a desk in a gloomy office for the rest of my life. He motioned his hand upwards. Look up and tell me what you see. The first thing that comes to your mind is a sky filled with stars. Correct? They nodded. That's the difference between you and me. When you look upwards, you see your limits, your shortcomings, as you will never be able to move beyond what's before your eyes. You can look, but you can't touch. Me? I have no such limitations. What seems impossible to you is a mere obstacle for me. One that I will remove myself if I have to. He felt the watch on his wrist pulse. Ho, it seems we've moved away from the original topic, it seems. Wait, you still haven't told us what all this has to do with you being older. Minato asked, as it was not explained why his son looked than he should be. Naruto glanced at him before he had a small exchange inside of his mind on whether or not he should tell him before deciding it wouldn't hurt. Very well. You see, after I managed to rip through space of time with the help of this thing. He patted the Vimana. I arrived at said world Gilgamesh informed me of. Let me tell you, compared to them this world is very basic. Almost primitive, in comparison really. Technology the likes of which you have never heard of or would be able to imagine exists there. Machines that could move from point A to point B with speed that would make Jounins look like genin when compared. You shinobi are like rabid animals in comparison to the way society works there. The age of ninja has ended there centuries ago though. I can't really call you all ninja now, can I? I mean, you shinobi are supposed to stay in the shadows, which is kind of hard with all these flashy jutsu you lot seem to love throwing around. Not to mention the fact that whenever you lot fight you attract an entire village with the noise you make. He shook his head as she was getting off topic. You'd be stronger than the majority there though, because as shocking as it might be, people there don't use chakra. Impossible. Without chakra you can't live. Came the outraged cry from his sister, who didn't spoke up until now. Are you insinuating that I'm a liar, sister? He asked as the air around him seemed to change. He wasn't about to let some girl he never seen the day before call him a liar, even if she's supposed to be his sister. Ah. And Naruto, calm down, that's not what Nami meant, correct dear? He said as he looked towards his daughter, who was quite shocked by his reaction to her words. She shakily nodded her head as the air around him screamed of danger. Good, keep that dog on a leash, will you? He said to his parents while insulting her. Minato and Kushina kept quiet, not wanting to agitate his son more than he already was at the moment, and restrained Nami from replying to his taunts. Now that you all shut up, I can continue. Where was I? Yes, people don't have chakra. Now that doesn't mean they are weak by any means, however. I can personally say that between them and all of you they would wipe you off the map with little problem. I have seen some of the weapons they have and most of them are easily capable of destroying one of your villages with one swoop should they try. He revealed, shocking them. So as you understand, instead of spending 3 years under Jiraiya, I was actually discovering this new world. All while my clone was acting like my old self to keep Jiraiya unsuspicious. I mean, it would raise a lot of questions if I had a sudden personality change, no? During those 3 years I spent most of my time getting familiar with the world while also sorting through the vault where I found this Vimana inside of. Despite that, however, this machine before you is just the tip of the iceberg when compared to all the riches that were there. Enough riches to make all of your daimyos combined look like mere peasant were inside. The Vimana here by itself is worth more than your daimyo's total worth. How? A shocked Tsunade asked as she couldn't believe that machine, regardless of how expensive it looked, could be worth that much, and she wasn't the only one. How, you ask? Look at it. I bet you thought its color was just for show, correct? He tapped his knuckles against the armrest. You'd be wrong. It's real pure gold, and those green plates you see on there, those are emeralds. So as you can see, I'm not joking when I told you I have enough wealth to make your daimyo appear as nothing but a spoiled little child next to me. He lowered the Vimana slowly until he was hovering just a few feet above ground. One brave shinobi started a chain of hand signs as they had enough of him mocking them. Katan, Gokaku no Jutsu, a fireball was exhaled and headed towards him. They were shocked when, instead of dodging, which they all knew he was capable of, having seen its speed before, Naruto stayed in the same spot, his smile never leaving his face. The fireball exploded as it came in contact with the contraption. Naruto! Numerous shinobi from Konoha yelled as they feared for his safety. They were surprised, however, to see him without any injury once the smoke dissipated. His amused smile still on his face. Then, faster than anyone was able to spot, the shinobi who fired the fireball fell face first into the dirt, dead. Now are you going to let me finish my story, or are you going to keep interrupting me? He asked like he didn't just kill someone seconds ago. It was disturbing for everyone to see the once happy and hyperactive boy act so nonchalant about killing. Even Sasuke had to blink as if not believing his eyes that the dobe killed someone. No, he can't be called that anymore. Perhaps if he was still his old self he could, but not this version of him. No, this Naruto was cold, uncaring, ruthless, and apparently couldn't give a single fuck about killing, evident by the corpse that lay near him. You know what, I'm going to shorten my story as I can't seem to talk 5 minutes without any of you interrupting me. The reason for me appearing older than I actually should be was because time went by faster in that world. You see, while my clone and Jiraiya were away for 3 years, I was actually there for 4, almost 5 years. Shocking, right? I know. So instead of my age being 17 like I was supposed, I'm now 18, halfway to 19 years old. He revealed. It's time, he thought as he looked at the watch that was around his wrist before looking down on them. Now, as much fun as this was, sarcasm was evident as he spoke. I have wasted enough time here, and it's time for me to go. What do you mean by that, Naruto? A loud voice stopped him from turning as he looked at the girl that interrupted him. She had platinum blonde hair done in a ponytail and seemed to glare at him with her hands placed on her hips. What do you mean by leave? Don't you care about us, your friends? Ino asked. Behind her he saw the rest of his friends agreeing with her. Friends, huh? He repeated softly as he looked each of them over. Perhaps in the past we could be called such. Now I would call you mere nuisances. What? What do you mean? Ino asked her that he would call them such. He noticed the others also sporting a hurt expression. Yes, bastard, what do you mean? Of course we are your friends. He heard the overly loud voice of Kiba. Next to him, his dog Akamaru barked in agreement. He saw the boy with the pineapple hair, Shikamaru, looking at the scene of them all yelling with a bored expression. Like he knew there was no use in talking him out of it. Konoha 12. He began causing them to pay attention. That was what we were called back then when Sasuke was still with us. After he left it became Konoha 11. He glanced around. Now it's Konoha 10. Referring to Niji giving up his life to save him along with cousin, making them wince at the memory. Soon it will be Konoha 9 as I have no need for any of you. Look at yourselves. Compared to me you are nothing. The only one here strong enough to give me a fight is Sasuke. He looked at the dark-haired boy who stared right back. Averting his eyes after a moment, he continued. None of you come even close to my power. Compared to me you might as well be just ants, and like them you should know your place or I will crush you beneath my feet. The members of the Rookie 9 all looked down as his words hit home. They were true, as none of them came even close to the power he held with the exception of Sasuke, but he was still a missing nin. Even after all the training they did, the countless hours they spent on improving, they were even further behind than before. Said boy had a smirk as he heard Naruto's words. Naruto had just acknowledged that there was no one aside from him who would pose a real challenge to the blonde. Though he was also confused on what to do next. A part of him wanted to fight Naruto, the only person who he could safely say was a rival for him. Just a fight between them, both going all out, but now he wasn't so sure. The blonde had just revealed numerous new abilities that he never heard of. Not to mention that the flying contraption he was currently seated on was still largely unknown. Aside from its insane speed, he didn't know anything else about it. Nothing about its weaponry was revealed except that it seemed just as quick, as he had not managed to catch what it used to kill that shinobi that attacked him. Granted, he didn't have his Sharingan activated at the time, but it was still an unknown factor that could turn the tide during fights. Combined with his total change in personality, no, Sasuke would wait out for now. What about us then, Naruto? The booming voice of the bijou caused everyone to look into their direction. Their towering forms were easily spotted as they stood near each other with Kyuubi in the middle of them. HM? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the bijou's question. What are we supposed to do now? Kyuubi asked him. I don't know. I mean, Minato over there still has the other half of you inside of him, correct? Said Blonde nodded. You could join your other half. The other me had befriended you on false pretenses, so to say. I mean, you're looking at the real me in front of you. Peace and all that bullshit my other part was blabbing sounds nice and all, but let's be real here. It will get boring sooner or later. The other option is that I could let you go with me. The seal is still on me. He channeled a bit of chakra as the Shiki Fujin appeared on his stomach. It would nice to have extra power just in case. Though he glanced at his hand that still showed the sun mark he received from the sage. He was honestly surprised it was still there, though it looked to be a bit darker. I can show you everything I've done during my time there, as I kept you in the dark surrounding the events that took place. The bijou seemed to think before it came to a decision. I will join you. The fact that you still have the sun mark is proof that you're not as evil as you seem. Not to mention, I'm curious as to what there is to discover. He wasn't sure if he saw it correct, but the large fox seemed to be smirking before he opened the seal, and bijou dissolved into smoke which got sucked into the seal. What about you, HM? He asked the Hachibi. I will go back to B. Surprising the others. I have gotten used to B's rapping, and someone has to make sure the fool doesn't do anything stupid. The Eight Tails joked. The rest of the bijou looked at one another before Matabi spoke up. We will stay here and enjoy our newfound freedom while also keeping the balance intact. The feline bijou spoke with a feminine voice. If that is your choice, was all he said in return. Wait, Naruto, please don't leave. We can be a family now, it's all over. She pleaded to her son. Her words got everyone to look at the Uzumaki Namake's family as if they were crazy. Yes, Nisan, please don't go, Nami begged. Hearing them beg for him to stay disgusted Naruto, and it was noticed by the expression he wore. I remember back when I was a child and kicked out of the orphanage. I was alone and afraid. I had no one except the third Hokage that cared about me. So many times I asked him who my parents were, if they abandoned me because of the Kyuubi. His words caused his family to flinch. He told me he couldn't tell me except that they died in defending the village during the Kyuubi attack and that they both were heroes. I accepted that, you know. For an orphan, not knowing anything about your parents, or who you are, it's painful. Over the years the urge to know who my parents were became less and less until it was gone. I accepted it. I accepted the fact that my parents, whoever they were at the time, were good people who gave their life for their child. He took a deep breath as everyone was listening to his story while sending disgusted glares at the trio. Then I managed to meet you, Minato, inside my seal. It was interesting, you know. After spending some time inside, I discovered a different chakra signature, though it had a sense of familiarity. So imagine my surprise, well, more like the other Naruto's surprise when he met you. Namake's Minato, the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, who also was my father. I kept the info to myself because something felt wrong at the time. While it wasn't really me who actually spoke with you, I was still able to sense something being wrong surrounding you being there. At the time I didn't know what, but you being alive before might explain that. Minato couldn't help but avert his eyes to the ground as he heard his son speak like that. Then there is you. He turned to the redhead next to Minato. Kushina Uzumaki, the red hot-blooded habanero of the leaf. Wife of Minato Namake's and my mother, though the latter is debatable seeing how I have practically raised myself. But I am your mother, she exclaimed, only for her to be silent as his blood-red eyes landed on her. My mother, you say? Please tell me where you were when I needed someone to comfort me, Kushina? When it was my birthday and no one was there to congratulate me, and when I cried myself to sleep. Where were you then, Kushina? Oh, I know where you were. You were off somewhere else with your pathetic husband and that sorry excuse for my sister. Isn't that right, Kushina? Not once did you check up on me, your own son, to see how I was doing. How can you even call yourself a mother when you abandoned your own son? How can you even be called an Uzumaki when they were known for never abandoning their own? Tell me, Uzumaki Kushina, he yelled down at her. Silence reigned the area as nobody dared to speak. Each of them too shocked as they listened to Naruto, as with words he managed to transform Kushina Uzumaki, someone girls once used to look up to as a role model, into a sniveling mess. Realizing he let his anger get the better of him, Naruto took a deep breath as he calmed himself. Feeling his anger reside back in his mind, he looked at her. The anger in his eyes was replaced by disgust as he gazed at her whimpering form that was being held by his father and sister. Enough of this. The longer I stay here, the worse this place is for my health. He sat back down on the throne and started to move, only to stop once more as someone else dared to interrupt him. What? He snapped, annoyed as he looked at who dared interrupted him. He was this close to killing them and just going on his merry way, but stopped himself. Since he won't be coming back here, he might as well hear out whoever it is. Making his way towards him was a girl with dark blue, almost black hair that reached mid-back. She wore a green flak jacket and black pants with bandages over her calves and black sandals. The most noticeable feature, however, were her lavender eyes that seemed to stare with a look he had seen in someone else before. He recognized her as the Hyuga heiress. The same girl that used to stalk his old self when they were younger, when he was still a foolish boy with foolish dreams. Naruto-kun! Hinata called out as she stopped and looked up to him. Please take me with you, she begged as she stared up at him. What? Numerous yells could be heard through the field as they catched what she said. No one actually expected those words to come out of her mouth. Yes, they knew she had a thing for him, but that was the old him. Did she not hear him insult each and every one of them? Hinata, what are you doing? The voice of her teammate, Kiba, was heard as he looked at her in bewilderment. Said girl looked down slightly before schooling herself. Sorry Kiba-kun, but this is my choice, she told the boy, who seemed wanting to reply but was stopped by their third teammate, Shino, who shook his head at him. Sighing, he nodded at Hinata, who gave him a smile before turning her attention back on now Naruto, and saw he didn't like being kept waiting. With renewed determination, she stared straight into his blood-red eyes. Naruto-kun, please take me with you. I have loved you since we were young. There, she finally admitted her feelings for the boy. Feelings she had ever since he had saved her when they were younger. Love? She heard him ask. You love me? She nodded. Something was wrong, however, as he looked amused. Tell me, how can you love me when the only real conversation we had was not even a few hours ago? Explain please, because not once have you ever shown you love me as you say you do? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Because we are the same, you and I. We were both shunned, you from our village and me from my family. My family, they looked down on me due to me being more gentle. They said it was unfit of the heiress of the Hyuga clan, and that I should be more ruthless. That I was a failure. Those words stung and I was ready to give up, she said as everyone listened to her story. Not far from them, Hishi averted his gaze in shame as he heard his daughter speak. He knew he had been hard on his eldest, but never knew the extent of what his words did to her. But you gave me strength. I saw how you were looked down on, avoided by everyone like some kind of plague. But instead of losing yourself to your hatred, you kept on smiling, acting like nothing happened. Seeing you, someone else who experienced the same pain as I had, react like that gave me strength to be like you. To keep on going despite what others thought about me. She finished her story before she, along with the others, waited for his reaction. Then it came. Laughter. It started soft but quickly became louder and louder as he threw his head back while he kept on laughing. Down below, Hinata wasn't sure what to do. She had expected him to come down and take her with him, or admit he too had feelings for her, not this. The flying contraption he was on seemed to reflect his mood as it started to sway from left to right as his laughter was heard throughout the battlefield. Everyone from Genin to Kage, missing Nin or Bijou, looked on as Naruto acted like he was told a joke. Ahahaha, you think that that you understand my pain, Hyuga Hinata? His voice held a dangerous undertone as he glared at her. Hinata recoiled slightly from the intense look on his face, while others were surprised at how quick his mood changed. High, she said, though there was a lingering doubt. In response, Naruto commanded the Vimana to lower itself till it was hovering just above the ground. The shinobi around him moved back till it was just himself and Hinata who stood before him. She tried to keep her fearless act, but the longer those red eyes of his bore into her, the more insecure she became. How dare you, Hyuga Hinata, to compare my pain, my suffering to your own? Huh! He said as he looked livid as the air behind him began to ripple. How dare you to tell me that what I experienced is comparable to your own? Whereas I was hated by everyone in the village, you were a pampered heiress of the prestigious Hyuga clan. He mocked her, making her flinch. I had no one, do you hear me? No one. Whereas you, little Miss Hyuga, you had an entire clan to look out for you. Whereas I was abandoned by the man who was supposed to look out for me and the woman who was supposed to take care of me, you on the other hand at least knew your mother, and you still have a father and sister who care about you. What do I have? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Apparently my parents thought I was too big of a burden to take care of me, leaving me behind in a village inhabited by a bunch of prejudiced idiots. From the ripples behind him, weapons could be seen slowly poking out. Swords, spears, axes, and halberds of all sorts poked out, slowly increasing in number the angrier he got. You name a weapon and it was there. So don't you even dare to say you understand my pain, because you know nothing, Hyuga Hinata, absolutely nothing. If you think you do, then you are more naive than I thought. As he finished his speech, Hinata could be seen standing, tears leaking down her eyes as his words broke her heart, and she slumped down to her knees. Glancing around, he spotted the shinobi around him, all had their kunai out as if ready to defend as they looked past him. Confused, he looked behind him and saw that in his anger he unknowingly activated the Gate of Babylon, and mentally commanded the weapons to return before closing the gate itself, causing them to lower their guards slightly. What are you mongrels all looking at? He asked as he spotted the glares sent his way by the remainder of the rookies. You bastard, how can you do this to Hinata? Easy, just as you saw. I hold no feelings for her and never had or will. It seems you still not realize that I'm not the same Naruto you knew. Did you expect me to just accept and return her feelings like some kind of dog? No reply was given, and he decided that it was enough. No more interruptions, as the more time he wasted, less of a chance he had to leave. I'm done here. You will never see me here again unless I will it to happen, and the next person to interrupt will be killed. He told them as commanded the Vimana to rise, not stopping until he was a good few hundred feet above them. Realizing what his son said, Minato, in a last ditch of effort, chugged a three-pronged kunai at the hovering aircraft with all his strength. The kunai whizzed through the air, then just as it was about to reach the aircraft, Naruto, together with the Vimana, were gone. No trace and no noise was left behind, as Naruto had traveled at speeds that were impossible to match. For a moment everyone stared at the space he previously occupied, some still not able to fully comprehend what just happened. They couldn't understand that the man they watched leave was the same as the happy-go-lucky blonde that saved the world. He looked down with a frown as he had watched his fellow Jinchuriki disappear. He wasn't as surprised as some of the others were. He could sense Naruto was hiding something back when they were on Turtle Island, when he came to attempt to take control of his bijou. The boy's happy and cheerful acting was a mask his pain, which they could practically feel as he tore into both his mother and the Hyuga girl. His words held enough anger and hatred. He was able to make one of the top kunoichi turn into a sniveling mess, and he did it with ease. He's gone. I can't sense my counterpart anymore. Minato heard the Kyuubi inside of him speak, snapping him out of his trance. Glancing around, he locked eyes with Sasuke, who shook his head, showing that he too couldn't sense him anymore, even with the mark they shared. Then, realization set in. His son, Naruto, was gone. The boy both he and Kushina had abandoned has left their world, perhaps forever. Tears gathered in the corner of his eyes as he silently cried while comforting his wife and daughter, who were wailing for the loss. One for a son and the other for their brother. Not far away from them, a still sobbing Hinata could be seen being comforted by the remainder of the rookies. Each of them still shocked as how he torn into the girl. Kiba especially, saying how he would beat Naruto into the ground next time he sees him and force him to apologize. He was, of course, ignored. Sasuke glanced at the Namikazes with no small amount of disgust. Even he was shocked when he saw the yellow flash suddenly appear on the battlefield, even more so when he introduced himself as Naruto's father, when he along with everybody else knew Naruto was an orphan. Averting his eyes, he looked over to where Hinata was being comforted by his old comrades. He was honestly quite speechless as he listened to Naruto reject the girl. Hell, he couldn't even call it that, as it looked like he had mentally broken her, as the girl seemed to look ahead of her into nothingness while they did their best to garner her attention. Rejecting was what he used to do with Sakura when they were younger, when he would reply with a no or a HN each time she would ask him to do something with just the two of them. This was more of an annihilation to Hinata herself as a person than a mere rejection. From the corner of his eyes he saw Sakura staring at him. Her green orb staring almost longingly at him. He didn't pay her much attention though, as he turned around before activating his Susanoo and flying off, leaving her to stare at his retreating form with a frown. There was nothing for him there to do. He had hoped on fighting Naruto, but that chance was gone. There wasn't much left to do. He could perhaps ask for pardon due to him playing a big part in them winning the war, but what then? Without Naruto there to challenge him, there really wasn't much left for him. He would probably be bothered by Sakura constantly asking for dates, and such as it seemed she still hadn't gotten over him despite his attempts to kill her. It made him question her mental stability, to be honest, as who would still be in love with someone that had attempted to murder you multiple times? Well, there was Naruto, who was adamant on rescuing him. Actually no, that Naruto was a fake. The real one had gotten over him. Sakura wasn't the only one who stared at Sasuke's retreating form, as not too far from her Kakashi watched as his second student leave with a sad look in his now too regular eyes. Looking at Sasuke leave, Kakashi couldn't help but blame himself for being a failure as a sensei. He who was supposed to be there for his genin had failed tremendously on that aspect. First was Sasuke and now his sensei's son Naruto. While the former was somewhat expected, it was the latter that shocked him. Never in his life had he expected Naruto to be able to act so heartless. to be able to deceive them all like he had done. However, he looked over to where his sensei was at, still holding the crying forms of his wife and daughter. He wasn't the only one to blame for Naruto's behavior. Perhaps if his sensei had acted like an actual parent, Naruto would still be here, be still the same old Naruto they had come to like. He chuckled as he could almost imagine Naruto shouting happily at them after defeating the Jubi. Shouting how he was one step closer to becoming Hokage and joking around with Sasuke. Spotting Tsunade, he made his way towards her while preparing for what she might do now that Naruto, the boy she saw as her own family, was gone. Feeling someone near them, Minato looked up from his position and spotted his remaining student heading his way. "Hello, Kakashi." The words dyed his throat as he saw his only remaining student walk past him without as much as acknowledging him, or his family, and continue his walk. He wasn't the only one. Minato noticed the shinobi who were ecstatic to see him before now seemed to ignore him. A few regarded him and his family with disgust visible in their eyes as they shook their heads. They couldn't believe that Minato Namikaze, their beloved Hokage, had faked his death and in conjunction abandoned his own child. It wasn't the same Minato Namikaze they know. No, the man before them was just a former shell of what was once a hero. High in the sky above the Pacific Ocean, ripples formed in the air. Out of them came Naruto, still seated on the Vimana, ignoring the cold air that hit his chest. Interesting, he mused as he spotted miles upon miles of ocean in every direction he looked before quickly activating the cloaking mechanism to hide himself from any radars. A hologram suddenly popped up before him, allowing him to enter his destination. The second he confirmed his destination, the Vimana moved without him having to do anything. His eyes were closed as he enjoyed feeling the wind blow through his blonde hair. Moving at such speeds it took him no time to near land, and he opened his eyes and gazed upon the country of Japan. Naruto was walking through the streets of Kyoto, his hands in his pocket, and his hood covering his face as he ignored the glances sent to him from blushing women as they looked at his bare chest, as he had a small smile on his face. Not a mocking smile or one of amusement, but one that portrayed warmth, as he continued to walk to his destination before stopping as he looking in front of him. There, not too far away from him, sitting on a swing with her head down, was a small girl around 3 or 4 years old wearing a custom-made Miko outfit. What stood out though was the necklace she wore around her neck that showed a green gem hanging from it. It was the necklace Tsunade had given him when he went to retrieve her. Now that he thought about it, she was one of the few people from there he could stand being around. With her head held down, Naruto wasn't able to spot the expression the girl held. His eyes flickered golden under his hood for a second, allowing him to sense what she was feeling, and frowned. He could feel the girl's sadness radiating as she wobbled her feet on the swing in what seemed like an attempt to move. Closing his eyes, he focused on the necklace she wore, causing it to gain a faint glow which caught the young girl's attention. Grabbing the necklace in her hand, she lifted her head up, allowing her own gold-slitted eyes with a tint of red to see the man that stood not too far away from her. Tears gathered in the corner of her eyes as she plopped down, her tiny feet walking in the direction of where the man was at. Naruto watched as the small girl walked towards him before moving as fast as her small feet led her. Kneeling down, Naruto pulled his hood back, allowing her to see his golden blonde hair that was slicked back slightly, and his blood-red eyes that gazed at her with adoration. "Otusin!" the young girl exclaimed in surprise. Naruto's smile widened as he spread his arms. "Yes, Kunou-chan, it's me, your Otusin," he said softly. "Otusin," Kunou said as she launched herself into his arms, tears running down her cheeks. Naruto closed his arms around her as he hugged her close to him, doing his best to soothe her as he let his aura washing over her, this time expelling warmth and safety at his daughter. He felt her relax in his embrace, and heard her sniffles as he ran one of his hands through her hair. In response, Kunou allowed her fox ears and tails to become visible, her tails wrapping around him as she leant into him, enjoying the feeling of his hands rubbing her ears. "Kunou has missed you, Otusin," he heard her mumble into his jacket. He leant his head slightly down and kissed her between her ears that twitched in response. "I missed you too, Kunou-chan." Soon thereafter he felt a large yet familiar signature near him as he was still holding his daughter, who seemed not to have noticed. "You! Who are you, and what do you think you are doing with my daughter?" he heard a feminine voice ask him as a large amount of Ki was sent at him. He chuckled softly. Same old Yasaka with how overprotective she can be. The shaking of Kunou caught his attention and quickly released his own soothing aura, which stopped her shaking. "I asked you something?" Yasaka said as she watched the person in front of her that was holding her daughter with narrowed eyes, surprised that Kunou had her tails wrapped around said person. She had wasted no time to locate her the moment some of her guards entered her office, telling her they spotted an unknown person near her daughter who according to them was very powerful despite not looking like such. Now, here she was staring at the back of the unknown blonde-haired man that was holding her daughter. Chuckling was heard, which caused her to narrow her eyes. He thought this was funny. Before she could open her mouth, the person spoke up. "Did you forgot about me already, Yasaka-chan?" Yasaka gasped as she recognized his voice. And Naruto-kun, is that you? She asked while ordering her guards to lower their weapons. Tears gathered in the corner of her eyes as she watched the figure turn around to reveal that of Naruto, her Naruto. The father of Kunou and her mate. His red eyes shone with love, which she returned as a soft smile formed itself on his face as he held his free arm out. Yasaka wasted no time as she ran towards both Naruto and her daughter and felt his arm encircling her waist. Her guards had lowered their weapons as they watched Yasaka press her face against his chest while hugging him and her daughter closely. I can't believe you're here, she said, her voice muffled due to his jacket like Kunou before. Of course I am. I did promise you to after all, he replied as Yasaka leaned back slightly and gazed into his eyes. Gold meat red as they stared at the other until she noticed it for a split second. Pain. It was hidden very well, but she could see it. Her Naruto was hurting deep inside. Not physically, mind you, no, was emotional. Whatever had happened to him the year he was gone had caused him to gain emotional scars that ran deep. Standing on her tippy toes, she gave him a chaste kiss. Delighted as she felt him return the affection after a second. Breaking the kiss, she saw her daughter, her face pressed against his chest as she was asleep. Naruto-kun, are you alright? He heard Yasaka ask with concern. Yes, why are you asking? He looked at her with confusion. Instead of replying, she moved her hand close to his face before swiping it across his cheek and held her finger out for him to see. You're crying, she said as he looked at her finger, which was wet. Heh. He moved his hand away from her to rub his eyes. I guess I'm just happy to be here together with you and Kunou. She smiled before grabbing a hold of his hand. Let's get you inside as you seem very tired. She waved her guards off as she led him to their home. Naruto just followed her, smiling the entire time as he allowed he to pull him around. Red eyes slowly opened as Naruto could practically feel the sun shining down on him. Warm, he thought, as he could feel something was wrapped around him tightly. As his eyes slowly opened, he was met with a face full of blonde hair and tensed slightly before calming himself as he remembered where he was and who was apparently holding him. He moved on of his hands down to his waist and soon came upon what was wrapped around him and quickly identified it as being her tails. Yasaka, he murmured softly as he ran one of his hands through her tails while he watched her sleeping face. A small smile crept onto his face as he blew air at her, watching as her face scrunched up in annoyance before it was quickly gone. So, this is what you did during your trip? The deep voice of Kurama startled him slightly. Instead of answering, Naruto willed himself to appear inside the seal in order to speak face to face. He arrived in the familiar-looking sewer that represented his seal and headed toward the location the bijou was at. Arriving, he spotted the large fox, its head resting on its two hands. Its red irises meeting his own. I must say I'm surprised. Especially after how you turned down that Hyuga girl back then. Naruto wasn't sure if it was amusement that shone at the fox's eyes or not. He scoffed. I have no interest in a weak girl such as her or any shinobi really. Though I can tell you that it wasn't my intent for me to end up with her either. The fox raised a non-existent eyebrow, prompting him to explain. It happened during my travels not too long after I arrived here in this world. I went to Japan as the language is almost exactly the same as in the elemental nations. Unfortunately, I had a problem with the Vimana, the flying contraption, which caused me to end up in Kyoto. Of course, I was aware that Kyoto is ruled by yokai, having read through numerous scrolls that held enough information about this world for me to start traveling. So, not even a few minutes after I ended up in Kyoto, I was already surrounded by numerous guards who seemed ready to attack any time, partly due to my high energy output at the time. I decided that it wouldn't be smart for me to kill them, mainly due to me being in the area ruled by yokai, so I allowed them to bring me in, so to speak. I was honestly quite surprised when the leader turned out to be a woman. Though, seeing as she is a Kyuubi yokai, it was understandable. They are the strongest of their race. Her personality was quite inviting. She was also surprised when she found out a human was capable of using chakra, as it's only used by yokai here. Yes, she was serious in the beginning, but once I explained I wasn't here to cause trouble, her personality did a complete 180, and she became somewhat flirty, I guess. Kurama interrupted him. Weren't you like 15 or something? Kurama asked, curious as to why someone would flirt with someone so young. 14, but yes, I see your point. However, as you can see, he motioned at himself. I looked older than I actually was due to the changes I underwent back then. Back to what I was getting at. She was flirty, and me, not being used to people flirting with me, got quite easily flustered, much to her apparent delight. He chuckled slightly at the memory. She allowed me to stay here till I was able to fix the Vimana for free, despite me offering to pay her numerous times. Every day she would come over and we would talk, mostly about non-important topics that consisted about telling about herself, with me doing the same afterwards, though I kept mostly to myself. It was nice. Soon I managed to fix what was wrong and was prepared to leave, much to her apparent sadness. Something I too felt, which was surprising seeing as I stayed here just a little more than a week. She asked me to stay a little longer, as it was quite refreshing for her to spend time with someone as me. I eventually conceded and stayed for a few more days, much to her delight and mine despite not voicing it. The evening before I was supposed to leave, however, she came by with a few sake bottles. I'm not sure what happened, but it's safe to say we both ended up drunk, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but I had pretty much shut you out from interfering. Kurama growled at that, which he ignored. Next morning I woke up with a hangover and naked as the day I was born before I felt something warm on my chest. Imagine my surprise when I lifted the covers and came face to face with Yasaka, also naked, hugging me closely. It's safe to say I knew what had happened, and so did she, judging by the satisfied smile she wore. So you lost your virginity to a hot kitsune woman? Kurama said with a smile which drew a small twitch of Naruto's eye. Pretty much, he admitted with a shrug. He didn't feel ashamed of it. In fact, he was sure lots of people would wish they were in his place. The rest of the day was spent with me blushing while Yasaka was quite clingy all the way up till I left. I remember her look as she looked at my method of traveling. Never before had she seen anything like it, either did the guards that came with her. Then, after promising to visit again, she finally let me go, and I wasn't seen for a couple months. It wasn't until 3 or 4 months, I think, yes, somewhere around there, that I overheard some fallen angels talking about Yasaka apparently being pregnant. A scowl appeared on his face. I killed both of those crows after I heard how they were talking about having a go at her themselves now that she's pregnant with a child. Fallen angels? Kurama asked, curious about what these creatures might be. Oh, he snapped his fingers as the water below them rippled and formed an image of a male in his mid-20s. He had black hair with purple eyes, but what got Kurama's attention were the pair of large black wings that came from his back. This world is more interesting as the other one. It has numerous supernatural creatures existing in it, from fallen angels to gods. Fallen angels are angels that have fallen from heaven after having impure thoughts that made them fall from grace. These thoughts are surrounded around the 7 sins. Most of them fall because of lust, though. The water rippled again and a second figure appeared next to the fallen angel. This one was the stark contrast of the first male. He had blonde hair, green eyes, and wore what looked like some sort of white robes. Floating above his head was a halo, and extending from his back were a pair of pure white wings. This is an angel. They were created by the biblical God who was the leader of the angels. He was very powerful, said to have been one of the strongest beings in the universe. Kurama interrupted him. You keep saying was, are you telling me God is no longer alive? Naruto hummed. Indeed, it's not known to the many that the biblical God is no longer alive. I was quite shocked myself when I read it, but alas. Centuries ago he perished in battle between the 3 factions. From what I read, he died due to being exhausted, having sealed Trihexa, or also called Beast of Apocalypse, away before fighting the war in his exhausted state, or something. I don't know who currently is in charge of heaven, but my bet would be on Michael, who's one of the most, if not the most powerful angel alive. The water rippled once more. This time it showed a man with black hair and black eyes. While he didn't look anything special, Kurama spotted the bat-like wings that came from the man's back. Last but definitely not least are devils. As you see, they look like your everyday human, which allows them to travel around freely. The majority of them live in the underworld, though there are some that are spread around the world. They were originally led by the 4 great Satans, them being Lucifer, Beelzebub, Leviathan, and Asmodeus. However, they too had perished in the great war between them, angels and fallen angels. After the biblical God was killed, I'm not sure what exactly happened, but another war started. This one kept between devils. One group that wanted to continue the fighting, which were named the Old Satan Faction, and as the name suggested was made out of members from certain families that wanted to continue the fighting. The other group existed out of those that wanted to stop the fighting to ensure the continuation of their species, as a majority of the original 72 pillars, that's what they were called, were extinct. The Anti-Satan Faction, which was what they were called, fought against the Old Satan Faction, with the latter losing. Having won, the Anti-Satan Faction decided they need someone to fill in the emptiness left behind by the original Satans. 4 new Satans were chosen. Seraphal Leviathan, formerly Citri. High magic reserves and capable of using ice magic. The water rippled and Kurama looked at the person that appeared. A woman with black hair done in twin tails, violet eyes, and quite a large chest. Falbium Asmodeus, formerly Glaciolabulus. I'll admit that I don't know much about him aside from the fact that he's a great strategist and presumably is very powerful to gain the title of Asmodeus. Kurama watched as a second figure appeared beside Seraphal. This one was of a bald male with a goatee. Now the next 2 are the most powerful of the 4. First up we have Ajuka Beelzebub, formerly Astaroth. He's a master tactician and scientist, having invented some of Underworld's more important systems and machines. Other than that, he has immense magic power, surpassing any devils with the exception of the last Satan. He's also one of the most powerful devils in the underworld and is considered one of the strongest beings alive. His ability is Kakara Formula, allowing him to create and dismantle almost anything. Next to the two Satans, another figure appeared. It was of a male in his 20s with blue eyes and green hair slicked back. Not like his own, mind you, which still held its spikiness but more flat. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Suzuke's Lucifer, formerly Gremory. He's the strongest devil in the underworld and properly gained the title Lucifer. Like Ajuka, his magic reserves are ridiculously high, not to mention his usage of power of destruction, an ability that originated from the Bale clan. As the name suggests, if one is good enough, which Suzuke definitely is, they can destroy literally anything. A fearsome ability to fight against. Said to be a master in hand-to-hand and a master magician, and like Ajuka is considered one of the strongest beings in the universe. Once more the water rippled as the figure of Suzuke showed itself next to Ajuka. Like the others, he appeared around his mid-20s with long crimson hair and blue-greenish eyes. Those are the new Satans, each chosen for the power they held, which makes the devils the most powerful of the three factions. He looked at Kurama and saw that the giant fox was paying rapt attention. Now, where do the yokai come in? He asked, though it wasn't really a question. Well, the yokai are more of a neutral faction. Whereas angels have heaven, devils the underworld, and fallen are both in the underworld and human world, the yokai however keep themselves in Kyoto. They're also the smallest when it comes to numbers and are led by Yasaka, a Kyubi yokai. Kurama watched as a small smile appeared on Naruto's face as the figure of Yasaka appeared in the water. Strength-wise, she's considered ultimate class when talking in devil terms. She can also transform into a giant nine-tailed fox from what she told me. Her being a Kyubi at the center of Kyoto's ley lines allows her access to immense spiritual power, giving her an almost infinite power supply. He told Kurama. They are also on good terms with Shinto gods. He loosened his shoulders before he spoke up. Now back to what I was saying before I began explaining about the three major factions. So I overheard some fallen angels talk about Yasaka, who was apparently pregnant, and went over to visit her, having not been there in 4 months. Apparently news of Yasaka's pregnancy reached every other faction, and everyone, including me of course, wondered who got her pregnant, as she had not spoken of the person who knocked her up. So, a few days later I arrived at Kyoto and was almost immediately called into her office. Entering her office, I was met by Yasaka, who looked quite nervous and had a small bump on her stomach indicating her pregnancy. After an awkward silence she spoke up, telling me that she was pregnant, and that I was apparently the father. Needless to say, I fainted at hearing that news. He chuckled softly at remembering that. Kurama himself showed a smile at that news. It was quite funny for Yasaka though, apparently, as she enjoyed teasing him for it. I woke up not too long after and we sat down to talk. Though it was mainly me asking if she was sure I was the one who got her pregnant, which she confirmed, as she had apparently not slept with anyone else once she found out she was pregnant. It appeared my seed was quite fertile. Though I could tell she spoke the truth, as I could sense a mix of both her and my energy developing inside of her. I asked if she could keep my identity a secret, as I didn't want to let everyone know of my existence, which she didn't mind. The next couple of months I would regularly visit Kyoto. Each time I would stay a certain amount of days to check up on Yasaka and to get to know her better. Because despite knocking her up, we didn't really love each other, I guess, as we had only spent one night together. Luckily for both of us it developed over time though, and 5 months later Kunou was born. He told Kurama. That's how I became a father at such a young age. The water below him rippled and the previous images disappeared. They were replaced by a large image of Yasaka and Naruto, both holding hands, with the former leaning her head on the latter. The small form of Kunou was seen standing before them, all of them smiling. However, he looked at the image and Kurama could practically feel the happiness he radiated from where he was at. I honestly wouldn't want to change a thing, he said before turning to look at the giant fox. He was about to speak but suddenly froze. It seems Yasaka is awake. Talk to you later, Kurama. Kurama watched as Naruto's body faded away from the seal, leaving him all by himself. Naruto opened his eyes and came face to face with a pair of golden irises. Hey Yasaka, he greeted the foxy woman who smiled at him. Morning, Naruto-kun. She returned his greeting with a soft smile. She leaned upwards and pressed her lips against his own for a moment before pulling back. He smiled before looking her over. She was wearing a loose-fitting robe which allowed him to see more of her unblemished skin, much to his delight. He looked down and noticed that his hand was still running through her tails, something she enjoyed as she purred softly at his touch. You know, she began. The elders will probably want to speak to you after yesterday. Naruto sighed at that. The elders, if he had to describe them, it would be that they were this world's version of Hamura and Koharu. Despite being there for advice, they would often overstep the boundaries given to them and act on their own. They had nothing to offer aside from wisdom, due to them being centuries older than Yasaka herself was. Not to mention that they were quite power-hungry as well, having tried to turn Yasaka into a breeding machine in the past in an attempt to gain more power. As long as they can keep quiet about Kunou, I will do my best not to do anything bad. Yasaka kissed him again. That's all I asked, Naruto-kun. They will most likely want to know about you being Kunou's father, and see your power. Power, huh, he muttered. He wasn't going to show them his full power, oh no. That was reserved for when he would fight Sasuke once more. He would demonstrate the Gate of Babylon to them. You should also show them our combined form. The voice of Kurama spoke inside his head. Good idea, 6 paths mode is reserved till we meet a worthy enemy. Though I can probably just buy them over. He nodded his head at his own and Kurama's plan. The vault held enough riches to sway anyone that could be bought, and so far he hadn't met anyone that wasn't swayed by money or other riches. He was brought out of his own thoughts and shivered slightly as he felt Yasaka's hands enter his own robe. Her smooth hands ran along his stomach and gave him goosebumps. You know, her hand moved downwards. I haven't had any release in a long time, she purred out. Unfortunately for Yasaka and somewhat for Naruto, she was interrupted from reaching her prize as the door to their bedroom slowly opened. Peeking from behind the door, Naruto and Yasaka spotted a pair of small blonde fox ears. Kunou? Naruto called out as he saw his daughter peeking in the room. Tusan? Ka-san? They heard the small voice of their daughter. Yes, Musum? Yasaka replied. Instead of answering, Kunou ran towards them and jumped on the bed. Yasaka removed her tails from Naruto's waist, allowing him to grab their daughter. Kunou launched herself into his open arms. Naruto fell on his back as he held Kunou close to him. Her small foxtails tickling his arms as they wrapped around them. Kunou relaxed in the warmth he was releasing. Yasaka smiled at the scene before she laid down next to them, her own tails wrapping around both of them. The meeting could wait as she was going to spend time with her own family. Back in the elemental nations, things weren't going as well as one would have thought after having just finished the greatest war they have ever fought. Many thought the 5 great villages would ally with each other to form peace as to make sure no one should have to go through a war such as the one they had. Unfortunately, it seemed like that wasn't going to happen after Naruto's little show he gave them. People were worried after what he showed them. Technology beyond their wildest imagination and strange power no one has heard of before. Some thought it was an act by Konoha to make them lower their guards and perhaps attack them when they would be weaker, as peace would mean that they would slowly reduce training shinobi. Not to mention that the appearance of Minato Namikaze, an army killer by himself, just added more power to Konoha. Some were saying it was an elaborate plan by Konoha itself to fake his death, and a way to lower the tension between villages. As no matter who they were, Minato Namikaze was a big player when it came to fighting and power. Not to mention that the man had part of the Kyuubi, the strongest tailed beast, sealed inside of him. If he wasn't classified as an SS rank in the bingo books, he would be now. Then there was also his wife, Kushina Uzumaki, who had the ability to suppress AbyssEater's chakra with her unique chakra chains. Daimyos of other villages were worried that while they would agree to peace, Konoha would go hunt for AbyssEater whilst and prepare their own army to take over their own countries. It was a scenario that wasn't completely groundless if one would look at the history of Konoha, or more specifically Danzo Shimura, who they heard had been killed by Uchiha Sasuke. The Uchiha was another person the other Kages and Daimyos were cautious of, having displayed power beyond any of them after being gifted with a Rinnegan. The boy was most likely the strongest person that was alive without Naruto here. Though from what reports had told them, he wanted nothing to do with Konoha and was a wanderer now that there was no one that could really challenge him. He had no interest of joining any village in the off chance that history would repeat itself and to keep the balance of power a bit more stable. Currently inside the Hokage office in Konoha, Tsunade Senju could be seen glaring at the 2 figures standing before her. Who they were? Minato Namikaze and Uzumaki Kushina, who did their best to meet her eyes. She was pissed, and for a good reason. They were the parents of the boy she saw as her own family, who instead of raising him like any good parent would had abandoned him to the wolves and apparently lived someone else happily while their son was shunned and beaten. Well, Minato, Kushina, is either of you going to explain why you 2 are alive and not dead like reported? She asked as she did her best to not lash out at the couple before her. Minato and Kushina could feel her anger, and knew that saying the wrong words would end up bad for them. They were technically 2 civilians after being reported dead and not having returned to active duty. Well, you see, Minato scratched the back of his head sheepishly. We don't know. Crack. The sound of her desk breaking caused both of them to flinch as she looked at them with something akin to disgust. You don't know? She repeated, not sure if she heard them correct or not. Kushina nodded her head. Yes, what Minato-kun said is true. Oba's Kushina was interrupted as Tsunade turned her glare at her. Hearing her use the title she only allowed one person to use. Tsunade-sama. Kushina corrected herself with her head held down. Okay, another question. Why didn't you raise Naruto? Both parents flinched at the way she worded it. We couldn't, Minato spoke up again. We were weak when we found out we somehow were alive. Then, after a few days we were able to move. We immediately tried to head to Konoha, of course, to see our son. I tried to use Hiraishin but? Tsunade inquired from the blonde. There was some sort of barrier that stopped us. I couldn't use my Hurration, which is weird because it's space-time manipulation, and for a barrier to stop me from teleporting it's unheard of. I mean, during the war I was able to teleport out of the Shiskyogen without any issue, but this barrier seemed to have surpassed space and time. Then there is the fact that there wasn't anything to see. When we tried walking we bumped into seemingly nothing, like there was an invisible barrier. So me and Kushina were stuck somewhere around Land of Fire with nowhere to go. We couldn't try to decipher the seal or whatever it was that kept us there, as there was nothing actually there to see. Animals could come in and out, but we were unable to leave and stuck there. The barrier seemed to go on for a few miles, which was enough for us to get food and water, but that was it. A year or two later we got a visit by a man. By now Kushina and I made a small home where we lived in and spent most of our time to think of a way to escape the barrier, with no luck mind you. Then, one evening this man just appears before us. We felt nothing from him, no chakra, just nothing. He told us that Kushina and I need to have another child. Minato frowned as he remembered that with Kushina doing the same. We declined, of course, as we didn't want to have another child while our son is out there, alone. Minato shivered, much to Tsunade's intrigue. What could make someone like Minato react like that? He didn't like our answer. He clenched his fist as the memories came back. I'm not sure what it was, but shortly after our answer we froze as the man released his power. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Even when I summoned the Shinigami it wasn't that bad. This man, whoever he was, made me fear like nothing before. He told us that it wasn't a request but a demand. He did something to Kushina, either of us know what, but he touched her stomach before he was gone. Just like he came, he left no trace behind. Shortly after that encounter Kushina was pregnant, and we had Nami. Minato finished his explanation. Tsunade didn't say anything as she went over what she was just told. Apparently someone was powerful enough to instill fear in both Minato Namikaze, the army killer himself, and Kushina Uzumaki, a woman someone would think twice before fighting. Not to mention being able to create something that transcends beyond space and time? It was unheard of. She would definitely send out scouts to find whoever this person could be. Wait, how were you able to join the war if you were stuck inside a barrier? It was Kushina that spoke up this time. Actually, we didn't know Tebane. Those white creatures, Zetsu they were called. They suddenly attacked us out of nowhere one day. They were quickly defeated though, and we went back inside before it suddenly dawned to us that someone aside from us had entered the barrier. So we once again tried to escape, and lo and behold we managed to leave the place. Getting Nami we left, and we wanted to head out towards Konoha but realized shortly after traveling that there was a war happening. Tsunade sighed as she massaged her temples. She was getting too old for something like this and wished Naruto was here so he could take it over from her. Unfortunately that wasn't going to happen ever. Every single village had branded Naruto as a traitor after his disappearance, including them. She was getting pressured into putting him in the bingo book, though instead of being killed he was to be brought back alive. There was also the matter of Sasuke, who was still a rogue nin, and she would have to update his bingo book entrance as well. Though it wasn't really necessary in her opinion, as she couldn't think of anyone that was powerful enough to take the Uchiha on. And if he wanted to become a wanderer, who was she to impose him? Honestly, Minato, Kushina, I'm not sure what to do with you. What you told me is very concerning, as there is someone or something alive that is able to jail both of you with skills no one has ever heard of. Are you sure the person was male, or could it be a disguise? She asked the blonde. Minato thought for a moment before shaking his head. I'm not sure, Tsunade-sama. The person wore a weird mask and a cloak that covered their figure, so it could be a woman that tricked us with her voice that was distorted due to the mask they wore. I see. She glanced between the two. I can't really keep you out of Konoha as much as I first wanted to, so you're free to go. Expect being called before the council later though, as they will no doubt want to know what you just told me. Tsunade said. Thank you, Tsunade-sama. Minato said with a bow that was copied by Kushina. She waved them off and watched as they left her office. As soon as she couldn't sense them anywhere, she called for a pair of umbu. Hokage-sama. A pair of animal-masked men were seen before her. Their heads lowered as they kept their eyes on the floor. I want you to keep an eye on both Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze. I'm not sure if what they told me is the truth, so I want you two to watch them closely. Be wary though, as Minato is an ex-Kage, and Kushina an ex-umbu member, so be advised. Hi, Hokage-sama. Both masked men said before they were gone, almost as if they were never there to begin with. Tsunade thought as she glanced outside over the village. I wonder if you are happy, Naruto, wherever you are. The Konoha 11, with the exception of Niji, who had died in the war, and Naruto, who had shockingly betrayed them all, were seen seated at one of the tables at Yakiniku-Kyu, a small restaurant located in Konoha. The mood was glum as they were all too shocked by the betrayal of the usual vibrant Naruto, who apparently wasn't as vibrant as one thought, having clearly seen who he really was. Sai was there though, having been invited over, as he too was upset. He still was getting used to emotions, but he would describe it as upset and shocked at Naruto's act of betrayal. Suddenly Kiba's head shot up. Has any of you seen Hinata? he asked after realizing they were missing someone. Shikamaru shook his head. No, from what I heard around the village, she has locked herself up in her room and is unresponsive after Naruto's harsh rejection. So troublesome. Scowls and frowns formed on the faces of the rookies, each of them clearly remembering how broken the poor girl was after Naruto was done with her. Her lavender eyes were staring lifelessly ahead of her, not receiving a reaction regardless of what they tried. It was shocking for anyone that knew him at how harsh his words were, but they held some merit. Not to mention that almost anyone could see his reaction coming. It seemed like Naruto had let out all his pent-up anger out on both his parents and Hinata. Some were wondering what the Hyuga girl was thinking when she decided to admit her feelings for the blonde. Was she not there when he revealed himself to all of them? When he ruthlessly killed someone and belittled them? So unyouthful. Lee voiced his opinion of Naruto's acts. And no one could deny that what he said was wrong. Naruto had made fun of all of them, calling them peasants and mongrels. They weren't sure what the latter meant, but judging by the way he was saying it, they were sure it couldn't be anything good. Shikamaru, however, being the smart person he is, was busy thinking over something else Naruto had revealed to each of them, and was surprised that not more people were speaking about it. Naruto had revealed the existence of a separate world connected to theirs. A world in which people don't need chakra to live, and apparently he was the only one that was able to access said world with that strange flying machine he had. That world was more technologically advanced than their own as the Vimana? Whatever it was that he called it was beyond anything they had ever seen. So far only Land of Spring had anything that was capable of flight, and that paled in comparison to Naruto's contraption. However, instead of the villagers focusing on that, they were focused on regaining strength after all the casualties suffered during the war. Tensions between villages were higher than they were before war, especially with other villages being afraid of Konoha with the news of Minato and Kushina, Naruto's parents, being alive. It was worrying for everyone that had hoped they could have some sort of peace now that the war has ended. Minato and Kushina were big players when it came to power, and they would disrupt the balance set between all the villages. It was one of the positives that came with Naruto's betrayal. He, along with Sasuke, were too powerful to be allowed part of a village. Sasuke was not here, and neither was Naruto, though in place of them Konoha gained Minato and Kushina, who could certainly change the battlefield with their presence. Shikamaru chugged down the sake in front of him as he finished his thoughts. He would bring them up to the Hokage when he had the time. He would no doubt be promoted to become head of intelligence after the death of his father. Troublesome blondes. Stares were sent their way by both yokai and human alike as they watched their leader Yasaka walk with a young blonde male around 18 or 19. While normally it wouldn't garner a whole lot of attention, the fact that they had their arms intertwined with Yasaka leaning into the male was the cause of their interest. Then, to the shock of those watching, the male kissed Yasaka, who didn't even seem to mind. In fact, she welcomed it. Seems like we are garnering quite an audience, HM? Naruto spoke softly at his companion. Yasaka hummed her reply while she led him to where the elders wanted to meet him. She was clad in her usual shrine maiden attire, aided by a white haori and geta. Next to her, Naruto was wearing the same white jacket he came with yesterday, except this time wore a gray button-up shirt underneath it. A pair of black jeans and the same dress shoes. Hope Kunou won't be too bored. Who did you say was watching her again? He asked the kitsune woman. She sighed. Minami is watching her, Naruto-kun. She's had watched her ever since you left. She said, drawing a small flinch from him that she noticed. Sorry. She apologized and pressed herself closer to him. Nah, it's fine. He waved her comment off. I understand, it's just that I'm worried now, you know. I should put more thrust in your people, but after certain events that have happened, it's somewhat hard for me. He reasoned with her, recalling the fact that his parents were somehow alive yet left him alone, subjected to a life filled with loneliness. He shook his head to get rid of those negative thoughts. Those times were over. He had plans for the future, big plans that he wanted to reach. It's fine, but don't worry. Minami has been serving under me for years and is very loyal. So if there is anyone that can take care of Kunou, it's her. She assured him before they stopped as they reached the location. We're here, Yasaka said before she opened the door and walked inside, Naruto following shortly behind. Naruto stood next to Yasaka as he gazed before him. Numerous yokai of all sorts of races could be seen seated in front of him, all behind an U-shaped table as their eyes seemed to scrutinize him. Naruto said nothing as his blood-red eyes lazily stared at the elders. He spotted all kinds of different kinds yokai. He saw an elderly male with dog ears and canines jutting from under his lips. A young-looking woman with brown hair and a pair of cat ears sticking out from her hair, a single tail lazily swishing behind her as her eyes, similar to those of Yasaka, looked him over. He looked around and his attention landed on a short male covered in brown fur. Wrinkles covered his face, making it hard to see if the man was paying attention or not. The last one that got his attention was an elderly kitsune yokai. He was old, and from how he presented himself, Naruto could tell that the man was more than likely the oldest in the room. He had a goatee and wrinkles covering his forehead. 3 brown tip tails could be seen behind the man in combination with the brown fox ears protruding from his head. "What is your name, boy?" the kitsune spoke up. Naruto raised an eyebrow at being addressed like such but didn't comment further on that. Compared to the yokai who had lived for centuries, he would be a boy. "Uzumaki Naruto," was the answer he received as his own brown eyes made contact with his red ones. "So Uzumaki-san, we have few questions that require some answers. Would you mind answering them?" It wasn't a question, and he nodded his head. The older kitsune gave a nod before he leant back in his chair, prompting someone else to speak up. "We are curious about what your relationship with Hisaka is." The one that spoke up was a tall female. She had black hair and gray eyes. His attention, however, was on Horn where her nose was, making it easy for him to recognize her race. "I'm fairly sure you already know what my relationship with Hisaka is, correct?" To make matters clear, he wrapped his arm around her and held her close. "I'm what you would call her Mati in your language. And also Kunou's father," he told them. He saw some of them scowl at that but paid them no mind. If they didn't like that, too bad, as long as they wouldn't try anything they could brood as much as they like. "Yes, it confirms what we thought. What about yourself? How old are you and what race?" the same female asked. "I'm 18, soon to be 19, and I guess human would fit the most." Outrage. That was the reaction when they heard that he was just a human. Their leader had mated with a human, a mere boy at that. "Silence!" Yasaka's commanding voice reverberated through the room as she released her power. It worked as slowly they stopped their vocal complaints as a weight settled over them. So caught up that they didn't even notice that Naruto wasn't bothered in the slightest. In fact, seeing her with such a commanding aura was quite hot if he had to say anything. "You will not question who I can and can have children with." "But you're the man," that interrupted was silenced as her slitted eyes, narrowed in anger, landed on him. "If all you're going to do is complain, I take it we are done?" she asked them and watched as they shook their heads. "Sorry, Yasaka-sama." They bowed their heads. They might be older and wiser than her, but power-wise she had them beat. That, and there was the male whose red eyes now showed a slight bit of amusement as he watched them get scolded. "Can we move on with other questions?" She really wanted to get this over with and get back to work or check up on Kunou. Anything that is better than speaking with them, really. "Yes," the man said that he was somewhat human. "What does he mean by that?" It was the older kitsune that spoke up once more. Yasaka glanced at Naruto, signaling it was his turn. "Well, you could say I'm quite special when compared to your average human." He held his hand out as a Rasengan formed. The yokai watched the spiraling orb in his palm. Despite him loathing Minato, he can't say that his techniques weren't useful. "I am possible," one of the elders exclaimed, getting curious looks from the others. "That energy, he's using chakra." He was shocked that a human was capable of using chakra. A power source that was only usable by yokai until now. "How interesting," the kitsune muttered, with some others agreeing as the orb slowly dissipated. "Do you have any other powers we should know of?" the monkey yokai asked. Naruto nodded his head before he snapped his fingers. They all watched as the air behind both him and Yasaka rippled. Weapons slowly started to poke out from the ripples. Dozens of them. Swords, halberds, maces, every type of weapon they could think of was there, floating behind him. Some radiating holy power while others radiating demonic energy, and some nothing at all. A small smirk formed itself as he let a few weapons shoot forward. Just before they reached them, he recalled them. The weapons dematerialized into golden particles as he called them back into the vault. Both Naruto and Yasaka carried identical smirks as they watched them slowly recover from the shock. "What was that?" the Nikomata demanded after seeing the strange ability and not liking the smirks they wore. "Gate of Babylon, it allows me to utilize my treasures of my fault as projectiles. As you felt, it has everything from holy to demonic, or just regular weapons if needed," he explained with slight arrogance. He couldn't help it, but it was one of the best weapons in his arsenal. "What about me?" he heard Kurama speak for the first time since this morning. "After you, of course," he replied. "No use in showing them chains of Enkidu. Now that I think about it, I should try to tweak them slightly, especially since the biblical god is dead." "That power, I have never seen such a thing in my life," one yokai commented. "Of course not," he scoffed. "It's from my ancestor, who was a collector, you could say. I'm the sole inheritor of it. No one else in my family line has awoken it before me." "So you're saying any children you might have can potentially unlock it?" the dog yokai asked, and Naruto could practically see the greed in the man's eyes. "Yes," he replied cautiously. "But I'm not sure what triggers it, as, like I said, I am the first since the original ancestor to unlock it." He wasn't going to tell them it was due to almost dying. Who knows what they might try to do with Kunou. "Interesting. Anything else you have to show us?" Naruto nodded before asking Yasaka to set up a barrier. "Yes, I have. This is something I have gotten on the night I was born." He looked at Yasaka and saw her nodding, meaning she managed to put up a barrier. "Ready?" he asked Kurama. Always. Hearing that, Naruto wasted no time and clapped his hands together. Chakra exploded outwards as they covered their eyes, Yasaka included, as she had never seen him like this before. After a moment they all opened their eyes and gazed in amazement at the transformation he underwent. From head to toe he was covered in a golden chakra shroud. The jacket he wore transformed itself in a high-collared haori with numerous magatama on it. His undershirt was completely black with a golden circle just above his navel where the seal was located and more magatama surrounding his neck. His hair seemed even more spiky than it already was and his pupils became slitted, like a fox. Thick black lines ran along his haori and arms down to his pants. Beautiful, came the voice of Isaka as she slowly walked over to him and began to inspect him. He was radiating life and warmth, and despite feeling his power output, it wasn't oppressive like one would think. This power, came the awe-filled voice of one of the elders. It's on par with some of the Satans. He revealed, gaining Naruto's attention and shocking his fellow yokai. Interesting, he thought as he heard that bit of info. So him using Kurama put him up there with the Satans. He doubted and was on par with the Juka and Surzex, but it should be more powerful than Seraphol or Falbium. Having enough, he closed his eyes as he recalled the power and returned to his normal appearance. I take it you enjoyed my little demonstration? He saw them nod and gave Yasaka a smile. So are you going to bother me and Yasaka or? No, it's okay, you've proven Yasaka did indeed choose wisely when she was looking for someone to mate with. However, we would advise you to take more women so that we see the man didn't get to finish whatever he wanted to say, as Yasaka directed her killing intent at the man. I wouldn't finish that sentence if I were you, Yasaka said almost in a whisper as her pupils dilated at what she just heard. The poor man cowered as her intent was focused solely on him. Others shook their head at the man. They could see that both cared for another, and the male wasn't interested in taking more mates. Perhaps in the future they could try again, but for now they were content with letting things be, especially now they gained a powerful ally. Good. She huffed before grabbing Naruto's hand. By the way, it would be best for us all if you could keep my mate's identity a secret for as long as possible. I have no interest in having meetings with different factions anytime soon. She received nods in return and smiled. Perfect. Let's check up on our daughter Naruto-kun. Yasaka led him out of the building, leaving the older yokai behind as they discussed what they have just seen and ways to use it to their advantage. End chapter. Yasaka was walking through the hallways of the palace, humming a small tune as she did so. It had been a few weeks since Naruto had returned to her, much to her happiness and Kunou's. After the meeting they had with the elders, she was happy they listened to what they asked and didn't spread the word of his return to every corner of the world. She was sure it had nothing to do with the power he had showed them in that meeting. PFF. Who was she kidding? She knew they were scared of him and were trying to do their best to not annoy or displease him, so they had a strong ally when needed. She snapped out of her thoughts and looked around, only for her eyes to stop on a particular painting that hung on the wall. It was a painting she had requested to be made not too long ago. It was a painting of Naruto, who was wearing a white kimono with a high collar and numerous magatama around it. A red dragon was displayed on its sleeves that started from the back. His blonde hair slicked back with a few locks covering his forehead, while his red eyes seemed to stare straight at her despite it being a painting. She unconsciously licked her lips as she recalled how good he looked while wearing it. Deciding she wasted enough time staring, she continued her walk towards her office. As she neared, she heard the high-pitched laughter of her daughter coming from one of the rooms. Curious, she carefully made her way over to the open door and peeked inside. As soon as she looked inside, a serene smile formed itself on her face. Come on, Kunou-chan, Naruto said, amused as he looked at his daughter, who seemed to be both pouting and glaring at him. It was cute, really. Tusen, the small girl grumbled. Behind her, 9 foxtails seemed to be swishing in preparation for an attack. Yes, he replied with a smirk on his face. She let out a low growl before she launched herself at him, intent of doing as much damage as her small stature was capable of. As she neared him, Naruto simply stepped to the side, his smirk widening as Kunou was launched headfirst into the couch beside. Oof! Was the sound she made as she collided headfirst into the couch. From where she was looking, Yasaka could see Kunou's small feet poke over the couch and stifled a giggle. Naruto watched as Kunou was laying upside down on the couch. She slowly opened her eyes, coming face to face with his jeans before she slowly moved her gaze upwards, making contact with his red eyes that twinkled in amusement. After a moment of staring, Naruto was the first to break as he neared the pouting fox girl. You are too cute for your own good, Kunou-chan, Naruto said as he pulled her onto his lap. Kunou struggled for a moment before giving up and moved closer to the warmth he provided. Naruto ran his hand through her hair, scratching her just behind her fox ears as she softly began to purr. Releasing a soft sigh, he leant back into the couch with Kunou close to him, not once stopping his hands as he closed his eyes. Yasaka watched their interactions with a fond smile. For the past few weeks he had been here, he had spent most of his time with both herself and Kunou, wanting to make up for any lost time he caused when he wasn't here. She could see it also helped his mental health. He was a lot more calmer, and less easily annoyed. Ah yes, the first few days he was in quite the mood as he lashed out at almost anyone aside from them. Spending time with Kunou seemed to have calmed his mind as he was light-hearted to be around. She wondered what had happened during the time he left that caused him such stress but had decided to ask him that later sometime. For now she was glad he was back with her and able to occupy their daughter's time during the day. She knew Kunou was quite sad when Naruto wasn't here for the couple of months. Even before he left, Kunou would spend most of her time with her father, as she was busy taking care running Kyoto. Then, when he left, Kunou directed her attention to her, and as much as it pained her she had to deny each time she wanted to play with her. Instead she appointed someone to do so. Now that he had returned she could see they wanted to spend as much time together as they could. Seeing them relax, she silently closed the door before heading off towards her office. She really should get started on her work. The moment the door closed, Naruto opened his eyes. He had sensed her watching them from the beginning. Not that he minded her watching them or anything, as he knew she saw that he was just having fun with their daughter. "You really are adorable," he said softly as he petted the small girl who had fallen asleep. She was the cutest kid he had ever seen. Her mouth was open slightly, allowing soft snores to exit while her head was drooped against his chest. Her fox ears were laying flat against her head, occasionally twitching when he would scratch a certain spot, and her tails were wrapped around herself. "You know, after the way you spouted off about peace back in the elemental nations, you're surprisingly not doing much." The voice from his tenant suddenly spoke up. Naruto ignored him. Instead he kept gazing at the sleeping form on his lap, his hands moving to her soft tails which he began to rub. "I'm giving her the childhood I never had," he finally replied after a moment of silence. Hearing his answer, Kurama was quiet. It wasn't what he expected, but he could see where Naruto was coming from. For someone whose childhood was robbed from him, it was easy to tell he didn't wish that one his own child. "Hey Kurama? What is it? Don't you think she's really cute?" "Yes," Kurama admitted after a moment, much to his shame. He has seen her from his jailer's eyes, and even he had to admit that she was a cute kid. Though from what he could see most of her features came from Yasaka. Her blonde hair had slight lighter tones in them, no doubt from Naruto himself. That and her golden slitted eyes had a red tint to them. Aside from that, she was pretty much a smaller version of the older vixen. "I'm still surprised a brat such as yourself managed to get someone like her." Naruto chuckled. He too was still surprised to this day what made him gain her attention. He wasn't upset with it, no, as he told Kurama that he wouldn't change a thing. It was just that Yasaka was a lot older than him, he knew that. At the same time though, somehow he managed to gain her affection. Him a mere human, well, not exactly, but she could have easily chosen some yokai that were around. It wasn't that she wasn't desirable, oh no. He had seen the glances sent her way when they would walk together, or the jealous looks some yokai would give him whenever he was spotted with their leader. Suddenly he appeared in front of the seal. Kurama looked at him as Naruto had his eyes closed. "You know the other reason why I'm not doing much, don't you?" He slowly opened his eyes and Kurama could clearly see it. There, in his red eyes, he could see the mental pain his jailer held. The pain he had hidden in his other persona. Where the other Naruto had hidden all of its pain behind a bright smile and his never-give-up attitude. The other Naruto that would do anything to save a friend, even at his own life. It was a way to cope with the loneliness he had felt in his earlier years and the fear of being lonely once again. The fear had calmed down after the trip with Jiraiya. Apparently it wasn't because of the trip itself, well, it was in a way. No, apparently his jailer's mental health had gotten better due to the vixen he had met here in this strange world. He wondered if it wasn't for her if he would have had a better chance at taking over his body earlier. No, he quickly got rid of that thought, as from what Naruto had told everyone, the other Naruto was merely a different part of him altogether. He wouldn't let someone take him over. Looking back, Kurama felt somewhat bad about his attempts at taking over the boy's body. Especially if he looked back at his life. Scorn for something her had no control over. Loneliness until he got put on a team with a boy who later shoved his fist into his chest. That event marked the change he underwent for the better, it seems. It got worse in the climax of the war though, when it was apparent that he had actual family. Kurama himself wasn't sure how they could be alive. He clearly remembered running his nails through both their stomachs. Not to mention that the other blonde brat had summoned the Shinigami of all people. He should have lost his soul the moment he succeeded and split his power in two. Instead they were alive, and to make it worse they had another child of all things. He couldn't see how that wouldn't mentally scar anyone. Even Naruto himself, who had a very strong will, was affected by their appearance. "Are you ever going to return to the shinobi world?" Kurama asked after they passed a moment of silence. "Yes," he answered after a moment. "As much as I want to leave my past behind, we both know that they won't let us. Kushina and Minato will no doubt spend all their time to find a way to reach me. Not to mention that I have little doubt other villages won't be after me if not for just the technology I showed them. I also have a feeling we soon will be visiting some friends. He glanced over to his right with Kurama doing the same. 8 floating orbs could be seen, each with a different amount of tails manifested behind them. It was the chakra given by the other tailed beast. It had no conscience as their bodies were back in the elemental nation, so they couldn't communicate, at least as far as they understood. When are you planning on going? Soon. I'll have to inform both Yasaka and Kunou first before I go. I have certain ideas in order to ruin their villages, one by one, and to stop them from bothering me. He spoke with a dark smile. Really? Kurama asked with a smile mirroring his own. Yes, I'm going to slowly start investing in each of the 5 villages, buy up their property to the point that they will be dependent on me. Then, I will suddenly stop the cash flow, no doubt inciting panic across each of the villages as their largest source of money suddenly stopped. He nodded as if agreeing with his own plans. It will cause mass panic and distrust between each of the villages. They will be afraid that in their state of weakness they will be attacked, not knowing each of the other villages having the same problems. He relayed his plan to the fox before him. Sounds interesting. Kurama spoke as he looked down at him. Indeed, I will set up some sort of base or whatever at Yuzushiogakure. If I'm correct, it should still be somewhat of a wasteland, which is perfect for me as it allows me to play around with it before I will hold the elemental nations in my hands. His eyes were closed as he still held his smile. The bijou before him chuckled. I will look forward how that will play out. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at the fox. Seems time went by faster than I expected in here. Talk to you later. His body disappeared from the seal, leaving Kurama by himself to stare at the spot he previously occupied. On the outside, he opened his eyes as he felt something tugging on his hair. Looking down, he saw that his lap was no longer occupied as he felt a pair of small hands play with his hair. Are you having fun, Kunou? He asked. His answer was the sound of her giggling. Hey Kunou-chan, how about we go and look for Ka-chan? He said before he stood up. Turning towards her, he held his arms out as Kunou jumped into them. Securing her, he headed up to the direction he could sense Yasaka was. Sitting in her office was Yasaka, who was looking over some papers sent over from the Nekishus that were living in the underworld. She didn't really understand why they would pick the underworld of all the places to live, but she never really bothered. Well, she had her ideas, which were around the peerage system the devils had invented. Nekishus of lesser families would often look to be added into a peerage in hope of a better life. Nekishus made great bishops once they had mastered senjutsu and yujutsu. There was also the fact that they were quite lookers once they matured. She remembered being approached once by a foolish devil who wanted to add her to her peerage. She had politely declined him, which he didn't seem to like, as he had tried to take her by force afterwards. She had sent him along with his other members of his peerage back to the underworld after she got done crippling them. Afterwards, she had subsequently banished him along with his members from entering Kyoto ever again. This was met by opposition by the Maos, but after explaining what he had tried to do, they quickly agreed with the sentence she gave him. The sound of the door opening caused her to pause with what she was doing before a smile formed itself on her face as she watched Naruto and their daughter enter her office. He walked over to her before leaning down as they shared kiss. Afterwards, she pecked her daughter on her cheek. Hello Naruto-kun, is there anything I can do for you? She asked him as he took a seat before her, still holding Kunou close to him. Not really, Yasaka-chan. I asked if Kunou-chan here wanted to see her Ka-chan, so I came by to check up on you. He replied with a smile as he watched Kunou hop from his lap over to Yasaka, who grabbed her and placed her on her own lap. I see, that's fine then, she said as she started to play a bit with her daughter. Naruto smiled at the scene. It was perfect, and would love nothing more for it to be like this forever. Unfortunately, he knew that was impossible, so he took each opportunity to enjoy moments like these. You know, he began. I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to help the yokai community? I have some ideas myself, but... Yasaka looked at him before she thought about anything that he could do, but couldn't think of anything that needed his help at the moment. Sorry Naruto-kun, but we're good at the moment. She looked apologetic, but he waved it off. That's fine Yasaka-chan, I was just asking. What is your idea then? She asked with a tilt of her head. Well, I was remembering you telling me about the evil peace system and the fact that every now and then someone would be forced into accepting, leading to a life of servitude for some of them. She nodded as she remembered her own experience earlier. Now, what I'm talking about is a way to purify yokai of their evil pieces, you could say. Yasaka's eyes widened slightly as she heard his idea. If what he was saying was possible, then it would be a great help to those that were forced into servitude, as they could help them. Devils couldn't retaliate, as they would no longer be half devil but just a yokai. Naruto-kun, is what you're saying really possible? She asked him. He nodded his head. If what you told me about evil pieces is correct, then it should be possible. I would have to create a large ceiling script that feeds off negative emotions and ones that represent devils as a whole. Such examples are greed, lust, envy, you name it. The seal would use those negative emotions and would dissolve them, removing whatever trace of demonic energy inside of their body, transforming it into chakra, which would return them to their state before being turned. He finished his explanation to Yasaka, who looked at him as if he just grew a second head. I will bring your idea forth to the elders. If what you're saying is really possible, then we could indeed help out some of our members who were forced into servitude, which we don't want. She nodded her head as she ran over his idea once more. Great. I'll wait for your answer then. I also have some other business I need to deal with back home. He picked his words carefully. Oh? She raised a single eyebrow, prompting him to continue. Yes, it has to do with my past. She saw his eyes darken at the mention. It's best for me to deal with it soon before it comes to bite me in the ass. I don't want them to try anything to either you or Kunou, he said with a firm tone. I see. How long will you be gone? She asked while suppressing her sadness at hearing his words. Relax, it shouldn't be more than a week at most, he said with a reassuring smile. His words calmed her fears. Relief flooded her system at his words. That's nice to hear, isn't it, Musum? The smaller kitsune nodded her head as her tails swished in excitement behind her. Well, I don't want to keep you from your work any longer than I already have, so. He stood up and walked over to her. Bending down, they shared another kiss before he motioned for Kunou to move over to him. I'll take Kunou for a walk, okay? Yasaka nodded her head. Be careful though. He smiled. Of course, we'll be back sometime around dinner. Let's go, Kunou. Say bye to Ka-chan. Bye, Ka-chan. Yasaka watched the two leave and waved them goodbye. As the door closed, she released another sigh before slumping in her chair as she continued to look over the papers she was busy with. It had been almost a month since the Fourth Shinobi War had ended, and despite the growing tensions between the 5 villages, the shinobis were glad nothing had really happened. The shinobi had buried their fallen comrades shortly after the war as a sign of respect for their sacrifice. In Konoha, a blonde girl around 15 years could be seen going through katas on an empty training ground. Her clothes, which existed of the standard kunoichi outfit with the addition of a red katana hanging from her side, were sticking to her skin from all the sweat she accumulated from her training. Ever since she, along with her parent, returned to Konoha, she had started to train herself to complete exhaustion. She had begged both her father and mother for help so she could bring Naruto back, and so they could be the family they were supposed to be. Her parents were proud with her determination and did their best to help her as much as they could. Her mother had helped her increase her skill with a katana, while her father had helped her with adding an affinity to the Rasengan. From what she had both heard and seen, her older brother was already capable of doing something like that. Unfortunately, she wasn't blessed by having a giant chakra construct inside of her gut that could fasten her training, and had to do it with just a few Kaigebunshin. Her parents would be busy trying to find a way to reach Naruto whenever they weren't busy with her. Unlike the majority of people, they didn't forget that he mentioned the existence of a second world connected to their own and that he was currently there. Though she wondered if it would actually help, as she heard the arrogance he spoke with when he said he was the only one capable of accessing said world. It was like he was bragging about it. She had also tried to talk with his friends. Well, ex-friends now, in her attempt to find out more about her older brother. She was surprised at what they all told her. He lived alone from a young age. Apparently her brother also used to be the dead last back when they were younger, and quite the prankster. He was also a loudmouth who didn't think before acting, getting himself into more trouble than he was worth. Despite those faults though, he was very loyal to his friends. He never gave up and was able to turn even his own enemies into allies, something she had seen during the war when he managed to win over her father's old student, Obito. Despite being labeled the dead last, he had quickly grown in strength and was apprenticed to Jiraiya, the legendary Toad Sage who was her father's own sensei. He also had signed the Toad contract, something she didn't have. Now that she thought about it, couldn't the Toads reverse summon him? Her eyes widened as she thought of that, and halted her training before sprinting towards the home she along with her parents lived. She arrived at her home, which was a modest-looking one. It was placed on the outskirts of Konoha, had a basic 3-bedroom design. It really wasn't anything fancy, as her parents decided they wanted to live in a normal home. Throwing the door open, she knew her parents were most likely in the library and made her way towards them. Ka-san, Tu-san! She yelled as she entered the library and spotted her parents looking at her concerned. Is there something wrong, Nami-chan? Kushina asked her daughter, seeing how she barged in the room. Ka-san, she took a few breaths to calm herself down. Ka-san, Tu-san, I wanted to ask if the Toads can reverse summon someone? They can, Nami. They used to do that with Jiraiya and myself. Why? Because Naruto holds the Toad contract, correct? Yes? Minato confirmed, not sure where she was going with this. Can't they reverse summon an Aisen then? For a moment silence reigned the room as Nami watched her parents' eyes widen. You're right, Minato exclaimed as he shot from his chair and hugged his daughter. However, and so came the bad news. I no longer have my name on the contract. Kushina's hope that was reignited by Nami's earlier statement came crashing down the moment her husband's words hit her. What about Tsunade? Is there a chance she has a way to contact the toads? Kushina asked her husband. Minato glanced at his wife and could see the desperate look she sported. He himself wasn't sure if she had a way to contact them, but it wouldn't hurt to ask, would it? I don't, Kushina-chan, but we can try. Kushina gave him a nod as she along with Nami stepped closer to him. Placing a hand on both their shoulders, a yellow flash filled the room as they were gone. Appearing inside the Hokage office, they were treated by the sight of their Hokage, sleeping on the job. Ahem, Minato cleared his throat in an attempt to wake her up. No luck. Sunda. Still no luck. Tsunade. Minato yelled while adding a bit of killing intent to his voice. That did the job as Tsunade's eyes shot open and she looked around before glaring as she settled her eyes upon the people inside her office with her. What? I was busy. The trio gave her a deadpan stare at her weak excuse. Minato shook his head as he decided it wasn't worth to argue. Tsunade, we were wondering if you have a way to contact the toads? Toads? Tsunade thought as she looked as if she didn't hear him correctly. Yes, why? She asked, unsure as to where he was going with this. Nami here, he put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Told us that since the toads are capable of reverse summoning, they should be able to do the same to Naruto. Tsunade's eyes widened slightly as she understood what he was implying. Very well. She spoke before flashing through a set of hand seals. Kuchios no Jutsu. A puff of smoke appeared before it was gone, and they saw a small slug on Tsunade's desk. Lady Tsunade? The feminine voice of the slug spoke as it spotted their summoner. Hello Katsuyu, I want to ask if there's a possible way for us to get in contact with the toads? Why? The small slug asked. In response, Tsunade motioned for her to turn around where she spotted the remaining members of the Uzumaki Namake's family. I see. The slug turned back to her summoner. I will ask Lady Katsuyu if there is a possibility, Lady Tsunade. The small slug spoke before it was gone with another poof of smoke. I guess we'll just have to wait, Tsunade said as she started to look over some papers. Most of them were regarding clan funds after casualties they suffered from the war and ways to increase their income. Nothing too important really. Time ticked by as Minato along with his wife and daughter watched Tsunade go through the papers with a scowl on her face. Minato easily understanding her annoyance, as he had been in her position once before. Suddenly though cracks began to form as she dug her fingers in her desk. Annoyance radiating off of her. This as she looked unbelievingly at the paper in her hand. What is it, Tsunade-sama? Kushina asked the older woman. This. She slammed the paper on her desk for all of them to see. The daimyo wants us to increase our focus on retrieving Naruto Uzumaki. With the tension between the villages rising and the losses suffered from the war, the daimyo is afraid someone might attack Konoha or his own family. At the moment we're weakened enough, a few minor villages can do major damage if they work together. That's not even to mention that someone reported to the man about the technology Naruto had and wants it for himself, or at least in his own hands. Hearing her words, Minato snatched the paper from her desk before he looked it over and saw that what Tsunade told them was indeed correct and handed it over for Kushina to see. Just as Kushina was about to open her mouth, another poof of smoke appeared itself on top of Tsunade's desk. The smoke disappeared, revealing a small green toad with white hair and a goatee covering itself with a cloak. Tsunade, Lady Katsuyu informed me you wanted to speak to me? The toad spoke to the Hokage. Yes, Fukasaku-sama, turn around. Fukasaku did what he was told and came face to face with the remainder of the Uzumaki Namake's family. Minato-chan, I guess Gamakichi was right when he told me you were alive, Fukasaku said before he jumped up and smacked Minato on his head. That's for leaving Naruto-chan all alone, and while I would like to be more enraged with you, your name was crossed out, so I expect an explanation later. Oh, of course, Minato said with his head bowed. Good. The toad turned to face Tsunade once more. Now explain why you requested me to be here. Very well. I understand you heard of the news surrounding Naruto's betrayal? She received a solemn nod. Yes, I heard from Gamakichi what happened. The toad was like all the others, shocked when Gamakichi explained what had happened shortly after the war had ended. Never in their lives had they thought Naruto of all people would betray them. Yes, it seems you are informed. I'll get straight to it. She pointed at the trio before her, asked if it was possible for you to reverse summon Naruto since his name should still be on the toad contract. The old toad used one of its hands and ran it through his goatee. It should be possible if his name is still on it. Going through a few hand signs, another poof of smoke appeared next to him, revealing it to be the toad contract. Opening the scroll, they saw that indeed Naruto's name was still there, written in blood. Hold on, I'll need some help with this, Fukasaku spoke before once more running through a set of hand seals. This time there was no smoke as they all watched a second small toad appear next to the other. Huh, what am I doing here? The other spoke with a feminine voice. Shima, I need some help trying to reverse summon Naruto boy for them. Fukasaku spoke as he pointed to the others in the room. Minato. Kushina as well, but who is this? Shima asked, looking at the blonde-haired girl standing near the couple. It was quite obvious to everyone who she exactly was, as the girl had Minato's hair color with Kushina's violet eyes. Ah, Shima-sama, Fukasaku-sama, this is Nami, my daughter. Said girl bowed at the two toads. Really now? Fukasaku interrupted Shima, reminding her what they were called for. Ah yes, reverse summoning Naruto-chan, correct? She received nods from those in the room. Both toads went through a sequence of hand seals simultaneously before slapping their hands onto the desk. Gyakukuchios no Jutsu. They both called out as a large cloud of smoke appeared in the office. Naruto was walking around Kyoto with Kunou placed firmly on his shoulders. Her small hands were in his hair as a way for her to hold on as she excitedly looked around. From what Yasaka had told him, she didn't let Kunou go outside very often, and the time she did allow her was with numerous guards with her for protection. So, now that she could explore Kyoto with him, he understood her excitement. As they walked, Naruto ignored the looks of wonder sent his way as they recognized the girl on his shoulders who was happily waving at passers-by. Though he couldn't really blame them, as no one aside from a select few knew his relationship with the princess on his shoulders or Yasaka. There had been a few whispers here and there, but nothing was confirmed or denied by either of them. They passed a couple of women who were glancing at him, while each sporting blushes. A small smile was all they got from him as he passed them, Kunou pointing in a direction she wanted him to go. That way! She exclaimed with joy. All right. He chuckled at her enthusiasm before heading off in the direction his daughter wanted him to go. However, just as he was about to move, he suddenly flinched as he felt his blood burning deep inside of him, followed by the feeling of something trying to pull him apart. What is happening? Naruto managed to rasp out while doing his best not to collapse with Kunou on his shoulders. Kurama? He mentally yelled to his tenant. Hold on, I'm working on it, was the reply he was given. Struggling to stand up, his eyes briefly flashed golden, and slowly he felt the burning sensation go away. Two-sen, are you okay? He heard Kunou ask. From the brief time he was able to sense her emotions, he knew she was worried, so he did his best to show he was alright. Yes, I am. Sorry for worrying you, Kunou-chan. He said softly and moved one of his hands up and grasped her own smaller one that was still holding onto his hair. Kurama, do you know what that was? I'm not sure, though I could sense it had something to do with the elemental nations. Kurama answered him. Anything else? Yes, I felt like I was leaving your body involuntarily. You felt it, right? The burning and the feeling like you were being ripped apart? Naruto gave a mental nod to his tenant. He indeed felt it, and it sucked. I think it has to do something with those toads. I'm not sure, but that is the only option I can think of that can cause something like we just experienced. Toads, of course. They tried to reverse summon me, but it failed, and then it tried to literally split me in half. Seeing as it is a space-time technique, it would make sense that it isn't limited to a certain dimension or world. Thankfully it failed, as it seems I'm either too powerful, or they had not enough chakra to succeed. This is worrisome. I'll have to find a way to remove any chances they have of summoning me back. Perhaps a certain seal which stops them from trying it again. Ugh, I'll think of it when I get home, as I'd rather not experience that feeling again. He thought while allowing Kurama to listen in. Feeling a tug on his hair brought him out of his thoughts and remember what he was doing. Alright, let's go, Kunou. He spoke before he continued their walk, or his walk. It was silent in the Hokage office as they all shared looks with each other. Once the large amount of smoke had dispersed itself, they quite shocked to see no one actually being there. The summoning had failed, which was unheard of. It was a space-time technique, so it should have been able to summon him here without any problems. Different world or not, the law of space and time should still apply. What now? Minato's question broke the growing silence in the office. We're not sure, as it never failed, the old toad said as it looked at Minato. I see. The answer was clear that they weren't any wiser than themselves and no help in this situation. Minato, Kushina, have either of you gotten any hints or whatnot to reach Naruto? Both parents shook their head at Tsunade's question. They had looked through all sorts of books and found nothing that would give them any hints to help them reach the place Naruto went. I see. She looked at the two toads on her desk. Thank you for your help, Fukasaku-sama, Shimi-sama, despite it not working out. It's alright, Tsunade-chan. We will ask Gamamaru-sama if he knows about Naruto-chan's whereabouts. With that, the two disappeared in a poof of smoke, leaving them by themselves. Well, you heard them. It was a good idea, but something stopped it from working. Anyway, I take it you two will be continuing your search? Kushina and Minato nodded their heads. Very well, now, please leave, as I have a lot of work, it seems. She glared at the paperwork that was stacked on her desk. Ha! Was heard, accompanied by the sound of wood getting crushed. Located in the training room inside the Hyuga compound, Hinata could be seen panting slightly as she looked at the aftermath of her latest onslaught. Her lavender eyes were cold as she seemed to be glaring at the training post before her, while the rest of her face was as stoic as Hyuga could be. Since Naruto's rejection, she had closed herself off from the world and instead spent her days in her room until a few days ago. They weren't ready, however, as they immediately noticed the change she underwent. Hakro Kujian Sho. She blitzed towards to the training dummy to her right. Yes, the moment she left the confines of her room, they could all feel the air around her had changed. Gone was the meek girl who couldn't speak properly without stuttering, and in her place was a girl cold enough to be worthy of being called a Hyuga. She had declined any invites sent to her by her friends in their attempts to hang out. No, instead she spent her time training, constantly improving herself so she could be together with the one she saw as her destined one. She saw his rejection as his way of telling her she was too weak. She needed to be stronger for him so she could give him strong children. The rest of the clan, her father included, were initially pleased by the changes she underwent as she finally acted like a proper Hyuga. However, they soon began to worry as she showed no love for any of them, including her younger sister Hanabi. Something she proved after ruthlessly defeating her in a spar. So now they were stuck with a most likely insane heiress. Oh, how they silently cursed themselves as they now preferred the more timid and shy Hinata over this one. Hinata. The stern voice of her father brought her out of her combat mode. Yes, Oto-sama? Hinata asked as she looked at Hayashi, who, despite known for not showing much if any emotion, looked with a bit of sadness at his eldest. We have a meeting and I want you to attend. You don't have a choice in this as it is your duty as heiress of the clan. Very well, she replied with a bow. Allow me to clean myself first. Looking her over, Hayashi saw that she was indeed dirty from the way her clothes were drenched in sweat. Very well, hurry up as I don't like waiting. Not waiting for her reply, Hayashi turned around and left her behind. Hinata watched the retreating back of her father for a moment before she too walked off. The training room was empty and silent for a moment. Crack. The sound was caused by a large crack that appeared on the training dummy Hinata had attacked earlier. A testament to her improvements ever since she started her training. The next day, Naruto along with Yasaka and Kunou were seen standing in the garden behind the palace. Behind him was his method of transportation, the sunlight reflecting from the material it was made of. Despite having seen it numerous times, Yasaka was still awed by it. She hadn't even heard of something like that existing. Kunou, on the other hand, was looked at it with curiosity. The fact that it was shiny added to its appeal. So you'll be gone for just 1 week, right? He nodded. Yes, Yasaka-chan, 1 week, and even that is only if I run into any trouble. Okay, she said timidly with her head bowed slightly. Naruto sighed at her actions and pulled her into a hug. Yasaka seemed to be afraid he was never going to return or something. He wouldn't do that to her or his daughter. He gave her a soft kiss, relaying his love for her within it. Breaking the kiss, he glanced down at Kunou before kneeling at gave her a hug as well. Take care of Ka-chan for me, will you, Kunou? He asked her as she nodded her head. That's my girl. He planted a kiss between her ears that twitched in response. Giving her one more hug, he stood up facing Yasaka once more. While I'm gone, can you present to the council the idea I gave you regarding a way to return reincarnated yokai to their original state? It would be nice to hear if they approve of it when I return. Of course, Naruto-kun. I will hold a meeting for that soon. It should go through as it will help us out more. Great. Now I really have to go, Yasaka-chan. He walked over to the Vimana and sat down on the throne. They watched as the wings spread out as Naruto spared them one last look before he activated the cloaking mechanism and disappeared from their view. Both mother and daughter stayed in the now empty garden for a little longer, their eyes lingering in the spot he was previously in. Kunou, she got her daughter's attention. Let's go inside. She turned around and headed inside with her daughter, quickly catching up with her. End chapter. He suddenly appeared, floating in the sky above the elemental nations. There was no sign that caused his appearance. He was just there. His red eyes glanced around. From his position in the sky, he was able to spot the faint shimmering of lights in the dark night below him. Probably from a small village, he guessed. A holographic map of the elemental nations appeared before him. As he looked at it, he realized just how small it was compared to the other world. A large difference was that, compared to the other world, the elemental nations was just one supercontinent. Just one big continent that held the 5 great nations with a few smaller islands scattered around. Let's see, he muttered as he kept his eyes on the map before him. Ah, there it is. He spotted Yuzu no Kuni on the map after letting his eyes roam for a bit. Seems it's closer to Land of Fire than I initially thought it would be. I am currently floating above Land of Stone. Interesting, he spotted the small red blip on the map. Wyack indicated his position. He uncloaked himself, making him visible for anyone to see, not that they could reach him if they did. The only ones that were capable of flight as far as he knew were Inoki and Sasuke, but he doubted either of them would know he was there at the moment. Having finished those thoughts, he turned around before setting course towards Yuzushiogakure. He closed his eyes as he began to travel. A short nap wouldn't hurt. A few hours later his eyes fluttered open before immediately squinting them almost completely closed as he was subjected to the sun directly shining in his face. Once more opening them, this time more carefully, he noticed that he was no longer moving but instead hovering in one place. Map reappearing once more, he noticed he was hovering directly above his location and commanded the aircraft to lower itself on the island that was Yuzuno Kuni. Standing up from where he was seated, he casually hopped off, landing on the firm ground and began walking. Behind him a golden glow encompassed the Vimana before it was gone. He stopped before looking around. Everywhere he looked were destroyed buildings. Evidence from the attack they suffered under Kiri, Kumo, and Iwa. He was surprised no one actually did something with the land after so many years. Continuing his walk for a bit, he suddenly stopped. "Come out, now," he said. For a moment nothing happened before slowly numerous figures appeared around him. Bandits, he thought as he spotted their outfit and weapons they carried. "Ho! Look what we got here, boys," one of them said as they began to circle him. "Tell me, boy, what's a noble like yourself doing here? Perhaps if you answer us we might let you go, after you hand over your possessions, of course." He finished with a laugh that was soon joined by his comrades. "Are you threatening me, mongrel? I guess I should show you your place like the dog you are." The air behind him rippled and they watched as he pushed his hand inside. Retracting his hand, they saw that he now had a weapon in his hand, a sword to be precise. It looked like a normal sword, with the exception of the blade itself being made out of pure gold. "You should be honored to die by one of my treasures." As he finished that sentence he moved. None of the bandits had managed to catch him as he reappeared behind the man that threatened him, his sword sticking out of his chest as he gurgled on his own blood. "Weak," was all he said as he kicked his body away. Seeing one of their own killed with such ease snapped them out of their state of shock as they began their attack. Naruto had no problems dodging their attacks, often moving just enough for their weapons to fly by. Moving his head to the side, he dodged a swipe that was aimed for his face before he quickly cut the offending arm off. Not letting the man react, he used the momentum from the swing to twirl on his heel and cut off his head. Spotting an axe heading his way from the corner of his eye, he, instead of blocking, sent out a swing of his own, his weapon shattering the bandit's axe with no resistance as he cut through the man's face from the nose up with little problem. By now the surrounding bandits were scared. They just watched this supposedly noble kill three of their own in a brutal and uncaring manner. This is not how they expected this to go. They expected the man to be afraid and hand over his valuables before begging for mercy. Instead they got a sword master that was making quick work of them. Their hands began to shake as they were wondering between attacking or retreating. Having enough, Naruto snapped his fingers as the air rippled behind him and numerous weapons poked out. Then, with a flick of his wrist, the weapon shot out. They had no time to react as the weapons shot at them with incredible speed, impaling them straight through their heart. "TCH, such a waste of my time," he muttered before looking himself over, and was pleased the kimono he wore was untouched. Sparing their corpses one last glance, he continued his walk till he came across a clearing. Nodding to himself, he snapped his fingers once more. This time, though, the area before him began to glow golden. He himself had to squint as the light was too bright even for him. When the light died down, he looked at what was before him. A small cabin was there. Despite its size, the aura around it radiated that it was only meant for the best if the best. Pleased with himself, Naruto entered the cabin and saw that there was a desk with a chair ready for him. Summoning a few scrolls from the vault, he went over his plans to have the elemental nations under his control. Glancing around, he seemed to miss something before realizing what exactly. Appearing in his hand was a small picture stand. He smiled as he looked at the picture that was placed inside of it. It was of Kunou and Yasaka when she was a bit younger. Taking one last look, he put it on the corner of his desk before he began to look at some of the scrolls laid out before him. Naruto released a sigh as he read over his plans once more. He had finished earlier and was giving it a look over. From what he could come up with was that if everything would go according to plan, something he doubted. Regardless though, if he were to invest a large amount of money, for them at least, in these villages, it should only take a couple years before the great villages would rely solely on him. To speed this up a bit, he would have to start buying up their buildings, one by one, until he would own a large portion of their respective villages. Another option was to kill their daimyos and take over in their place. However, he wrote that off as it wouldn't work out for him. If he were to do that, he would have to fill in their place for the time being, something he wasn't all too interested in. Finishing his thoughts, he stood up from his seat and headed outside. Once outside, he made a familiar hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called before numerous poofs of smoke obscured his vision. Once gone, he was met with the view of just less than 24 clones. "Make 4 groups of 5. He told the clones who did what they were asked. "Good, now I want one of each group to henge themselves into a noble-looking person while the other 4 henge themselves into guards. Each of you 4 groups is going to one of the 5 villages with the exception of Konoha, that one is mine. He walked up to the clones before applying a seal to each of them. The seal will make it so you keep that appearance for the entire time, which should be more than enough. I also gave each of you enough chakra to last a week, so I want you to be done before that, understood? He received a chorus of highs in return. Good, now go and only pop once you're done and out of the village. With that said, the groups were off. Each of them traveling in a full sprint that would allow them to reach their destination within days depending on how far. Keeping his eyes on the spot his clone occupied for another moment, he decided it was time for him to move as well. Instead of sprinting like his clones, he took a more casual approach and just began to walk. It was early in the evening and Naruto could still be seen walking. It had been over a day since he started his trip and had multiple urges to use his Vimana and just fly towards his location. Suddenly he stopped as his head snapped to his left. He could sense numerous chakra signatures heading his way. Using a quick hinge to turn his hair more flat and brown, and his eyes went from blood red to gray, he waited in his spot for a moment. Can you come out, Shinobi-san? Naruto requested after sensing their eyes on him. Not receiving a reply, he turned his head slightly before making eye contact with the supposed hidden nin. Finally, after what seemed like forever, 4 blurs appeared before him, each of them wearing an animal-themed mask. State your business in Fire Country, the bear-masked man said. I'm heading towards Kanahigakure no Sato for business. No guards? The Umbu asked him. He couldn't really blame him, as it wasn't often you would see a noble travel all by himself, especially not with bandits and perhaps even enemy shinobi around. No guards. I have been trained in ninja arts since early age in case something would ever happen that would kill any guards I have. Now that you're here though, wouldn't you mind escorting me to Konoha? I can pay for this mission, I guess, once we arrive. The Umbu seemed to share a few glances with each other before nodding at him. Thank you very much. Lead the way, Umbu-san, he replied before motioning the masked man to begin. If they were expecting him to bow, they came to the wrong guy. Umbra Squad, Bear Taishu reporting back from scouting. He heard the now leader of the squad he was traveling with informed the gate guards. The guard gave the group a look over before his eyes rested on him. Who is that? He pointed at Naruto. A man we came across during our scouting. He requested for us to escort him to Kanahigakure. I see, the guard said before beckoning him to come forth. Doing what was requested of him, he stopped in front of the man who proceeded to look him over. Name, please. He held out a notebook and a pen. Accepting it, he wrote down his name and gave it back. Suji Kairo, it read. All right then, welcome in Kanahigakure, they said to him, and Naruto looked around and noticed the Umbu near him were gone. Not bothered too much, he stepped inside the village he hoped he never had to enter again. As he walked through the busy streets of Konoha, he noticed just how unscathed the village was from the war that they had. Even now he could see couples and younger children walking around, talking like the war had never even happened. He stopped in his tracks as the familiar smell of ramen entered his nose. His eyes following the smell, which led to a certain shop he used to come so often, Ichiraku's Ramen. With a shrug of his shoulders, he made his way over. It wouldn't hurt him to eat there once more. As long as he didn't order over 15 bowls like his old self would, they shouldn't recognize him. Taking a seat, he gazed at the father-daughter couple that stood behind the counter. He could see the bags under their eyes and felt somewhat bad. As far as he remembered, they had been nothing but nice to them, from when he was just a small malnourished boy to when he was older. Then he had just left them and the rest of the shinobi world without even saying anything. He was brought out of his thoughts as the brown-haired girl, or woman waved her hand in front of his face. Yes? He asked. I was asking for your order, she answered with a kind smile. Sorry. I'll have a bowl of miso ramen, please. Ayam smiled before she relayed his order to her father in the back. So, what brings you here? The girl asked in an attempt to start a conversation. Looking her over once, he deduced that she was just curious, and it wouldn't hurt to answer her. Oh me, I'm here for business. How did you know I'm not from around here? That's easy, I noticed the way you were looking around as you walked through the streets. It was like you were intrigued or something. He chuckled at her reply. Correct, seems you're quite smart for a girl that serves ramen, any? He joked. She was about to speak up when they were interrupted by a loud voice. I am, for bowls of salt ramen please. The owner of the voice plopped down next to him, and he saw that it was his sister. Sure, Nami. I am, acknowledged the younger girl. Suddenly a bowl was put before him with a pair of chopsticks. He thanked the older man as he began to eat with grace one wouldn't expect had they known who he was. From the corner of his eye he saw his younger sister staring at him as he ate some of the noodles. Excuse me, can you not stare at me like that? He politely asked the younger blonde, who scratched the back of her head at being caught. Sorry. It's just that you seem familiar. Have we met before? He shook her head. Not that I know of, sorry, this is my first time here in Konoha. He answered before continuing with his food. He hoped she got the hint and allowed him to eat in peace. His prayers were answered as Nami's own food was served and she began to dive in. Was that how I used to look? He couldn't help but wonder with no small amount of disgust as she seemed to stuff her mouth full. Loud smacking noises as she didn't even close her mouth while chewing. The fact that she was raised by her parents made it even worse. Finishing his food, he put down his money before he stood up. His gaze shifted upwards to the moon that shone brightly in the night sky. As he looked, he realized just how much cleaner this world was compared with the other. One of the few good things that came from the fact that they were a lot less advanced than back home. Yes, home. He had already decided that this world wasn't his home. No, his home was where Kunou and Yasaka were, nowhere else. It's late. He spared the direction the Hokage's building was at a glance. I guess it wouldn't hurt to go there early next morning. With that in mind, he set off to the location. He knew there was a hotel for him to stay the night. He woke up the following morning with a groan of irritation. It had to be the worst night of sleep he had ever had. The bed he was laying on, it might as well be a rock with how hard it was for his back. Not to mention that after being used to sleeping with someone next to him, it was hard for him to fall asleep without an extra source of warmth. Then there was also the mild headache he had. Apparently one of the group of clones he had sent out had met their location, Kirigakure, while the others were close and should arrive sometime soon. Getting out of bed, he stretched his muscles, his bones snapping as he let out a sigh in relief. Looking to his right, he spotted his kimono where he put it yesterday evening and put it on. Yasaka sighed for the 10th time today. She missed him. Despite it being only a few days since he left, the lack of him being around was easily noticed by the slight frown that marred her face. She had gotten used to him being around again after he left for close to a year before. And now he was gone again. She didn't like waking up in bed alone and allowed Kunou to sleep with her. Her daughter also clearly missed him as she seemed more calmer than usual. Normally she would be happy, however she was quite the bundle of energy, and that behavior didn't fit well. She was always more of a daddy's girl. It didn't mean her daughter didn't like her or anything. It was just that Kunou expressed herself more when her father was around. Something she wasn't sure if she should be upset about or not. Thinking about him made her remember to plan a meeting with the elders regarding the idea he proposed her. She was almost 100% sure they would be delighted at his idea. Devils forcing members from different factions to become a part of their peerages had always been a big problem, especially for yokai, as they already were smaller than the other three. She had voiced her disapproval to the new Maos when she heard of Ajuka's invention, as they didn't have anything to stop devils from forcing others to join. She chuckled softly. It was just for devils to take what they want and not bother with the consequences. She could only imagine what would happen if someone would try to force Kunou into joining their peerage. Naruto would most likely kill them on the spot now that she thought about it, and she would help him. Suddenly a golden glow filled her office, causing her to look away lest she be blinded by how bright it was. Sensing the brightness was gone, she turned to look who intruded her office, only for her eyes to widen as she bowed her head. Amaterasu-sama. Yasaka greeted the goddess with her head still bowed in respect. Raise your head, Yasaka, Amaterasu said to the bowing fox woman. The woman in question did what was asked and looked at the dark-haired woman before her. Her golden eyes, which, unlike her own, were so bright it was as if she was looking at the sun itself, looked at her with an emotion she wasn't quite sure where to put it. She was wearing a dark kimono with small suns around the sleeves as she looked at her with a frown. I told you that you don't have to call me Sama, didn't I? We've known each other for quite long, and I like to say we are good acquaintances at least. Sorry, Amaterasu. She corrected herself as she spotted the glare sent her way. What can I do for you? She took the empty seat in front of her. News reached me of a certain man you and Kunou were seen with. Care to explain? What do you mean? Yasaka asked, trying to dodge her question. Don't play stupid with me, Yasaka. Reports reached me of you being seen walking hand in hand with a blonde man. Not to mention that he was seen walking alone with your daughter as well. Damn, how did she know that? Yasaka couldn't help but wonder. However, it also raised concerns that she should increase the security around Kyoto. While someone like Amaterasu, who is a member of the Shinto faction, are expected to have spies everywhere. It was concerning, as it was possible fallen, or even devils, to gain this information if they have spies around. Very well then, it seems I can't keep anything a secret from you. That man you are talking about, his name is Naruto Uzumaki. He is my mate and Kunou's father. Straight to the point she went, as it wouldn't help her much to lie to a goddess such as the one sitting before her. She saw Amaterasu's eyes widen at that piece of information before they narrowed. How come you didn't inform me of this information before? She had asked her before regarding the status of Kunou's father, but at the time she said he was someone unimportant man that didn't want anything to do with her or Kunou. He asked me not to. He didn't want himself to be known to the supernatural world, something no doubt would happen once news would come out about my mate. She reasoned with the goddess, who seemed to accept the reason she was given after a moment of staring. Yes, she could see where she was coming from, as Yasaka was an important figure in the supernatural world despite her faction being neutral. I see. I will forgive you for keeping that information away from me this time. Where is he anyway? A frown made itself known on her face. He's not here at the moment. He said he had to deal with problems back home that could potentially harm either me or our daughter. So as much as I don't like it, he's currently somewhere else. Why? Oh, no reason. I just want to see who the man was that was able to steal your heart. She laughed softly at the glare sent her way. Don't give me that look, Yasaka-chan. How long have they been bothering for you to have children or take a mate only for you to blow them off? It makes me curious as to how special he must be for you to talk so fondly about him. Ah, he's special all right, she said fondly. Really now? She leaned forward. Tell me something about him. Yasaka looked at her for a moment before shrugging. It wouldn't hurt to reveal a bit about him. Not to mention that it was better than doing whatever she was doing before she arrived. Pleasure doing business with you, Hokage-dano. A disguised Naruto said with a bow. Tsunade mimicked his actions as she held a small smile. They had just finished negotiations for the past hour and had come to agreements. He had bought up a lot of older property in the village, most of it was in the bad parts of the town. Not that he cared about that though, as he now owned just a bit over 20% of Konoha. A bit less than he wanted, but it was to be expected as most of the land was already used by the clans that were living in the village. Aside from that, he had invested a hefty sum of money in the village itself, something he knew they could use as they were still rebuilding from the war, and any money was welcome. It was actually what made him sure he would have similar success in the other villages. Not to mention that with their daimyos all being paranoid, they could use any money they could get. From the memory he received from the clones he had sent to Kirigakure, he managed to get more out of it than Konoha. He managed to buy almost 30% of the village that was now his. Of course it was still ruled by their Kage, however the ground was his and that was all that mattered. Their Kage, however, was quite the flirt. Not that it had any effect on him though, as her beauty couldn't quite keep up with Yasaka's own. He was glad the currency here, real, was worth a lot less than the ones used back home. I'll take my leave then. Perhaps I will look around and see what else Konoha has to offer. Do you require any guards or someone that can show you around? Naruto waved her off. I'm sure I will be fine on my own, thank you. Giving one last bow, he walked out. Opening the door, he almost bumped into someone he really wished he didn't have to see. Minato Namikaze and Uzumaki Kushina. Oh, sorry, are you alright? He heard Minato ask him. I'm fine, Namikaze-san. If you don't mind, I wish to proceed. He motioned for them to step aside. Oh, of course, he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as he let the man through. Thank you, they heard the man say before he was gone. Interesting, they murmured as they watched his back as he continued his stride. After he disappeared from their view, they knocked once before entering the office. Inside they found Tsunade wearing a large smile as she looked at the paper in her hand. Tsunade-sama, what made you so happy? Kushina asked the smiling Senju. In response, she handed the paper over to them, enjoying their expression as they read what was on it. So many zeros, Minato muttered as he stared at the piece of paper in disbelief. Is this real, Tsunade-sama? The older woman nodded her head. Correct, Minato, it is real. I didn't believe it either until the man showed me scrolls filled with cash. He invested hundreds of millions of ryo in Konoha, something we can really use. The daimyo will be delighted when he hears this. No offense, Tsunade-sama, but isn't this a bit suspicious? Minato asked, getting Kushina to look at him in confusion. I know what you mean, Minato, however the man is real. He comes from a small but very prosperous family whose members have all been killed during the war. He's also trained in ninja arts, which is surprising as most men like him usually let others do their work. But if it eases your worries, I have sent some Ambu to watch over him. Both for his and our own safety. She saw that he looked pleased. Now, is there anything else as to why you are here? She watched as they changed their posture and stood straight. Yes, Tsunade-sama, I was wondering if there is anyone left with a space-time technique like Kakashi's Kamui. We have a few ideas as to how to reach Naruto, but I think we would need something of that caliber in order to pull it off. Tsunade hummed as she closed her eyes and thought. Someone with a space-time technique similar to Kakashi's Kamui? Her eyes snapped open as she looked at the two. Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura told me his Rinnegan or Manjikyu Sharingan allowed him to travel through dimensions. Reportedly, he used it during their fight with Kagaya. You sure about that? I imagine that if he was capable of entering the dimension Naruto's, then he would have already used it, as he seemed adamant of fighting my son. Perhaps it isn't because he didn't but because he couldn't? Kushina butted in. Seeing their looks, she explained. One of his eyes allows him to travel through dimensions, as you said, yes. Now what if those dimensions differ from the one Naruto is in? I mean, Kagaya wasn't capable of entering the same dimension either, so what if they were missing something? Something that allowed them to lock on that specific dimension instead, one of the many random and empty ones. Both looked at her for a moment. What? She asked, annoyed by their stares. Oh, nothing, it's just that you've been so quiet for a while, Minato said to his wife, who scratched the back of her head. It seemed that was a trait in every member of their family, Tsunade thought, remembering Naruto used to do the same. Anyway, Minato, Kushina, how's Nami doing? At the mention of their daughter, a smile appeared on their faces. Great. She's been training very hard since her brothers left, and promised to return him to him. She has finished the Rasengan, and can do it with one hand now. We're helping her add an element to it next, just like Naruto has done. Interesting, what is her elemental affinity? Is it wind like Naruto or something different? Water, she has inherited Kushina-chan's water affinity. If you need any help, you should ask Kakashi. He had helped Naruto when he was making his wind Rasengan. Tsunade informed them, and a pang of guilt ran through Minato. He had finally managed to explain everything to Kakashi, from his death to somehow being alive once more. Despite that, though, he wasn't sure if their relationship would ever return as it was before, as he could tell he sometimes wanted nothing to do with him. Another reason was because someone else had helped his son with his achievement. Since the first time Kushina had informed him she was pregnant with Naruto, he had looked forward to father/son training. The fact that Nami hadn't inherited his elemental affinity made it so he couldn't help her much when it came to ninjutsu. Naruto was walking through the streets once more. This time the sun was shining brightly down on him. His face showed no emotion as he glanced at a couple academy children playing around with wooden kunai. In a few years they would graduate before wasting their lives for an ungrateful village. Most of them would die, only to be forgotten shortly afterwards. He shook his head. He was glad his own daughter didn't have to do anything of such. No, if practices such as these were being done back home, he was sure the government would have shot them down immediately. Something that was good, as he wouldn't want Kunou to have to waste her life for a village filled with ungrateful dogs. He and Yasaka would train her, yes, but she wasn't going to take weird missions that would have her risk her life. No, he would do his best so she would never have to anything of such. He wondered, and a part of him hoped she too would unlock the Gate of Babylon. However, he didn't know if it was possible for two of them to have said skill at the same time. It wasn't ever recorded either, as he was the first one to have gained the ability. He shrugged off those thoughts. Kunou was still young, and he wasn't going to start training her until she got older. Even then, he was sure Yasaka wanted to train her before him, as she should have inherited her ability to use Foxfire, something that was only used by Kitsune yokai. He should, however, start her on chakra control exercise as soon as he could. He had sensed the large amount of chakra she had in her, and so did Yasaka. It was easily comparable to some jounins, and if she had the same issues he had when he was younger, it would be best if she would start soon. Suddenly he stopped walking and gazed upon a familiar-looking building. It was the rundown apartment complex he lived in for most of his years. Sensing a few Umbu watching him, he entered a busy crowd before creating a smokeless clone and immediately using an advanced genjutsu to make him invisible and basic wind manipulation to remove any sound he made. Seeing his clone continuing its walk with the Umbu following him, he concluded his plan worked and made his way to his old apartment. The door made a creaking noise as he pushed it open, and he immediately stopped moving. Did no one enter his apartment since the war had ended? Was the thought that went through his mind. He had expected them to have at least searched through his apartment in search of hints as to where he was. Though evident by the dust that collected itself, it seems that they didn't. Oh well, with a shrug of his shoulders he stepped inside the glum apartment. He moved through his apartment, looking around in disgust. How could they have allowed anyone to live here? He was sure that if he would jump a couple times the apartment would break down. Entering the bedroom, he glanced around before he moved close to the bed and knelt down. Once he did that, he knocked a few times on the old wooden planks on the floor before finding what he came for. He removed one of the planks and reached in. Retrieving his hand, he was now holding a small black box. He opened it before smiling, as it was indeed untouched. Inside of it was one picture that held a lot of sentimental value to him. It was the day Kunou was born. It showed Yasaka laying in bed holding a small bundle in her arms. He himself was sitting next to her on the bed, a smile on his face as he was looking at both of them. He was glad no one else had found this picture, as it would raise questions he had no interest in answering. Not to forget, he would probably turn the village upside down if some random person was holding onto it. Grabbing the picture, he put the box back where it was before placing the plank back as well. Giving it another look over, he nodded to himself before he decided to leave. Stepping outside, an alarm inside of his apartment went off. Fuck. They had placed a trap in his apartment? Using a shunshin, he disappeared without a trace. Which was good, as mere seconds later a pair of Umbu appeared before his old apartment. The two communicated with a few hand signs before they nodded and entered the apartment. They would come out a few minutes later before reporting to the Hokage. Yasaka was walking through the hallway towards the meeting room, her geta making clacking noises each time they came in contact with the floor. She had requested a meeting to be held, and they had finally responded. Entering the room, she gave those present a look over before nodding to herself, and stood before them. Honorable elders. She greeted them with a slight bow. I have called you here today to discuss an idea my mate had come up with. I myself already approve of it, however I would like your input on the matter. She spotted them all listening and inwardly smirked. A few days ago Naruto came into my office and proposed a way for members of our race that were forced into servitude by devils to be cleansed. He told me that with the usage of sealing he should be able to remove the darkness, so to speak, from those that are reincarnated. The demonic energy that they have due to being a half-devil would transform into chakra, restoring their status as yokai. Once her explanation was gone, she looked at their faces, or their shocked expressions to be precise. Yasaka-sama, did we hear that correct? Your mate is able to return our members that were forced into servitude back to normal. She could clearly hear the disbelief in the man's voice. Not that she could blame them, as evil pieces were created by one of the mouths. Nonetheless, though, she nodded her head. If her mate told her he could, she trusted him. You heard that correct, Mirodano. He already had an idea in mind but wanted to wait for approval first before he would waste any time on it, only for it to be rejected. Despite the fact that if I agreed it would happen, regardless what Yupun's opinions on the subject are. Yes, she might ask for their opinions on his or her own ideas, but if she decided something was going to happen it would, and there was nothing they could do about it. She was still a Kyuubi no Kitsune and had more power than any of them. The only one that was capable of opposing her was Naruto, but the chance of that happening was so small she wasn't even going to bother to think about it. From the looks on your faces, I take it you approve of his idea? She asked them with a smirk in place. They shared a glance before turning to her and nodding. If he was truly capable of designing such a thing, then they needed it. Great, she chirped. I'll let him know once he returns. With that, the meeting is over. She gave one final bow before leaving them to themselves. Tsunade was still talking with both Minato and Kushina when they were interrupted by the arrival of two of her umbu. Tiger, Sparrow, what are you doing here? She asked the umbu who interrupted her talk with Kushina and Minato. Sorry, Hokage-sama, but we're here to inform you that someone has entered Uzumaki-san's apartment and triggered the alarm. What? The trio exclaimed in shock. That's impossible, as only a family member can enter his apartment. Minato and Kushina had put a special barrier around his apartment that would only allow someone with a similar chakra signature to enter, which meant it was either Naruto, Kushina, Minato, or Nami. Afterwards an alarm would trigger as they declared his apartment off limits. Hi, Hokage-sama. We saw signs of entry, and it looked like they were searching for something. Exactly what it was we don't know, as there was nothing left. Tsunade looked at them for a moment to see if they had anything else to say. When it was clear they didn't. Very well. I expect a more detailed report early tomorrow. Dismissed. The two left without a trace, leaving them all to think about what they were just told. You think that? Kushina began, and the others immediately knew what she was implying. I wouldn't count it out for now. They said that whoever it was that entered was looking for something, so it is possible Naruto was there to grab something he had forgotten to take before leaving. Something very important. Then we should look to see if he's still in the village. Kushina urged both her husband and the Hokage. Minato shook his head. Kushina-chan, do you really think Naruto is still in the village? I want to look for him as much as you do, but we both know that he's long gone, especially with that weird aircraft of his. Even I can't travel that fast. Seeing Kushina wanting to protest, Tsunade butt in. Minato is correct, Kushina. Our best option is to send someone to look for Sasuke so he can help us getting Naruto back. Okay, she said dejectedly before Minato hugged her. Several miles away from Konoha, Naruto could be seen walking, this time using a different henge. He had left the village the moment the alarm went off. The clone he made earlier, however, was still there as to not raise any suspicion. A big weight was removed from his chest as he dug into his pocket and took out the picture. God knows what could have happened had any of them accidentally discovered it. Channeling a large amount of chakra, he released it as it sent out a pulse. A few seconds later he closed his eyes before opening them and removing the henge surrounding him. He had sent out a chakra pulse in an attempt to see if anyone was following him, or if there was someone nearby. The signal having returned without any problems told him he was alone, and with that the area before him began to ripple as he called on his Vimana. He had no interest in walking all the way back, not to mention he would likely not make it back in the time he had told Yasaka he was gone. He had seen how she reacted when he had told her he would be gone for just a week. He didn't want to cause her more worries. With that in mind, he hopped on before making his way to Yuzushiogakure, going at a pace that was faster than Jonin but not too quick. It was night time as he neared the small island that is Yuzuno-kuni. From where he was at he could see a small light source down on the island. No doubt from the cabin he had left behind. As he was about to lower himself, his danger senses went in overdrive, and he quickly commanded the aircraft to move to the right. Just in time, as not even a second later a large, purple translucent arrow shot by. He kept his eyes on the arrow as it kept going and going till he could no longer see it. Ho! A smile crept on his face as there was only person capable of using said technique, and turned around, looking down at the small purple figure he spotted in the distance. Sasuke. He kept his eyes on his Susanoo while he was still hovering in the air. His eyes widening were the only sign of him noticing another arrow being fired at him. Deciding to humor him, he stood up from his throne and channeled chakra into the hand that held the sun mark. His hand began to glow brightly, and then, just as the arrow was about to reach him, he jabbed forward. Despite not being able to see it, he could pretty much imagine Sasuke's expression as with a single jab he had managed to cut through his arrow. For a split second he entered his chakra mode. Despite that, though, it was enough for Sasuke, who was able to feel the increase in power and reacted by increasing the amount of chakra sent to his eyes. Naruto watched as his Susanoo grew taller and taller. From where he was, he could sense the enormous chakra output of Sasuke as his Susanoo grew to its complete form. Its glowing eyes seemed to be glaring straight up to him. He was sure the entire land of fire was able to feel Sasuke's chakra with how much he was releasing. Despite that, though, he found himself not caring as a large grin formed itself on his face. Holding both hands in front of him, he began to form a Bijudama, though he kept it on the smaller scale. Satisfied by its size, he aimed it at Sasuke before letting it loose, his eyes following its movements as it came closer and closer. Returning the favor, Sasuke commanded his Susanoo to put its hand on its sword, cutting the Bijudama in half, similar as to what he did to his own attack. Both halves of the Bijudama traveled past him before hitting the ground. A large explosion happening the moment it touched the ground, kicking up enough dust and dirt to completely cover his Susanoo from his view. Once again his eyes widened. This time due to the fact that Sasuke's Susanoo came flying at him with neck-breaking speeds, not bothered by the debris that bounced off of it. Quickly he sat back on the seat and commanded the Vimana to turn around before shooting forward at an incredible speed. His loud laughter could be heard throughout the night sky as they were locked in a dog fight. Ha ha, I haven't had this much fun in a while. He screamed from the top of his lungs as he managed to dodge another arrow sent his way. He was moving from left to right with Sasuke mimicking his every move. Making a cross seal, he summoned a few dozen clones that exploded as soon as Sasuke passed them. Suddenly he turned the aircraft around while still moving. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly as he looked the familiar jutsu Naruto was holding. Take this, Futon, Raisin Shuriken. With that he threw the shuriken-shaped Rasengan at Sasuke, who had stopped moving as his Susanoo conjured up a bow. Enten, Susanoo Kagetsuchi. He quickly countered as he fired an Amaterasu-powered arrow at the incoming disc. Both attacks pressed against each other in a battle for dominance, but ended up in a stalemate as they both exploded in a combination of wind-powered black flames that were spreading everywhere. In Konoha, numerous shinobi were able to sense the large spikes of chakra that would happen every so often and were able to see the night sky lit up in the distance. Tsunade had sent Umbu to the locations they were happening, though she doubted anything would come from it as they seemed so far away. As the effect of their attacks died down, Naruto and Sasuke could be seen staring at one another. Done already? Naruto asked Sasuke, who was glaring at him as he held a smirk. HN. If you're not going to reply, I'll take it as yes and we'll leave. His smirk didn't disappear despite what he was saying. Dobe, no Naruto, what are you doing here? I thought you never wanted to step a foot here again. Sasuke corrected himself. Oh, you know, just some business and whatnot. Now, why did you attack me? He asked with a pout. I still want to fight you. Full power, no holding back. No. Sasuke was taken back by his reply. He was sure that he would accept his offer judging by the way he was acting earlier. Seeing his reaction, he decided to elaborate. You're too weak at the moment. If we were to fight, I would win, and that would be boring. Not me winning, no, it would be over too fast, which is no fun, hee. So, how about you go training a bit more and search for me once you gain some strength, HM. Naruto, he growled out his name as he listened to him speak. Calling him weak. Him, the last Uchiha, weak? He had fought a goddess and sealed her into the moon, yet he was being called weak? Naruto raised one of his hands as he saw the reaction Sasuke had due to his words. Listen was all Sasuke heard before he suddenly froze as he was assaulted by the overwhelming feeling of dread. What is this? Sasuke asked himself as he couldn't even move a single muscle. With great effort he managed to divert his eyes, only to see much to his shock that his hand was shaking. Am I scared? Suddenly the invisible pressure around him was gone, and he slowly looked up, right into the red eyes of Naruto. This time, however, any playfulness from before was gone. Do you see now the difference between us? You would more than just your Rinnegan to beat me, seeing as you froze up from my bloodlust. This strength, it's due to Konoha's treatment of me when I was younger. All my bottled up emotions the old me held behind his dumb smile. This is who you are dealing with, Sasuke. So go and train, get stronger, and when the time comes for us to fight, it will be the greatest battle the world will ever see. A slight crazed look was seen in his eyes before he left. Like before, no trace was left behind, leaving Sasuke floating midair, his Susanoo still around him. Sasuke clenched his fist as Naruto's words rang through his mind. Weak. He was weak compared to Naruto. He bit back a curse as he increased the pressure of his own fist, blood slowly leaking down his hand. The aura he had released at him was unlike anything he had ever felt in his life. So malicious he couldn't help but shiver slightly as he remembered it. Never before had he felt so afraid in his life. Not even when Itachi massacred his clan. Even Orochimaru's killing intent back when they were genin was nothing compared to the overwhelming aura of the blonde. As much as he wanted to deny his words, they were true. Even now, with that weird aircraft, Naruto was able to keep out of range of his Susanoo, and he wasn't even taking him seriously. He was going to do what he had suggested and train. Train like he had never done before, so that when they would meet he would live up and exceed his expectations. They would meet and have a fight so destructive it would make the Valley of the End look like the result of a bunch of children playing in comparison. With that in mind, Sasuke was off, the wings of his Susanoo flapping behind him as he left the area they had fought. Unknown to both himself and Naruto, a squad of Umbu had managed to spot Sasuke speaking to someone they were unable to correctly identify. They would return and report what they had seen to their Hokage. Naruto appeared high above the sky around Japan. Immediately he was assaulted by a headache as all of the clones he had sent out had popped due to him no longer being present in said world. A frown formed itself as he went over the memories he received. It seemed his mission partly failed when it came to Kumo and Iwa due to him not able to buy any ground there. He was however able to invest a large sum of money, which was good as it was the beginning of his takeover. What are you going to do now? Kurama suddenly spoke up. Oh? Here, I thought you were asleep seeing as you were so quiet during my little chase with Sasuke. Naruto said as he held a smirk Kurama could almost see despite not being there in person. He heard his tenant mutter something incoherently. But to answer your question, I have my hand in 2 of the 5 great villages. I didn't expect Gaara to decline, but he was always somewhat untrusting. Perhaps had revealed myself he would have accepted, but oh well. I have large investments in the 4 villages and their daimyo will no doubt take note of the sudden influx of money. Regardless though, with the increase of money I expect them to increase their military power, which will make others cautious of them. The relations between villages will get even worse before soon it will be just like the old days where you couldn't trust your allies. So despite me giving them a boost, it will only weaken them in the long run, making it perfect for me to take over, as sooner or later their money will run out with how paranoid they are, and they will be relying on me to keep themselves afloat. Low chuckling was heard. I have to admit I'm impressed with your planning. However, what will you do if something doesn't go how you planned it? If it comes down to that, I will remove their daimyo and put a puppet in place. Someone that listens to every command of mine. I really hope it doesn't come down to that, as it would be a lot of work to keep up. Now, if you're done, I'm going to see how my family is doing. TCH, fine brat. Kurama said as it closed its eyes and went to sleep. With the speed he traveled, it took him just a few minutes before he arrived in Kyoto. Exiting the Vimana, the aircraft disappeared without any command as he began heading towards the home he along with Yasaka and Kunou lived in. As he walked, golden particles surrounded his form, where they stayed for a few seconds before the glow died down. His white kimono changed into a black one with sakura petals imprinted from the neckline down. Sensing the disbelieving looks given to him due to him having changed outfit, he channeled a bit of chakra to his clothes as small seals lit up, effectively erasing their memory of what they just saw. As he neared his home, he spotted a pair of armored tengus standing guard, both giving him a slight bow as they recognized him. Tilting his head slightly, he entered inside and was immediately assaulted by the smell of home-cooked ramen Yasaka would cook every now and then. Kunou had inherited his love from the food, which prompted Yasaka to figure out a recipe that they both liked. Carefully he walked into the direction the kitchen was in, making sure he wasn't making any sound. Entering the kitchen, he spotted her standing in front of a stove wearing a light blue kimono. Her tails and ears on full display like usually when she was home. That and the fact that Naruto liked how she looked with them visible for all to see. Yasaka was busy preparing dinner for herself and her daughter. She wasn't sure if Naruto was going to be back, but made sure to make enough in case he did. He had promised he would return within a week, and it currently had been just under 7 days since he left. She stirred the noodles before adding the correct amount of spices to give it the flavor both he and Kunou liked. She silently cursed him for getting their daughter addicted to the noodle broth. Suddenly she stiffened as a pair of arms encircled her waist and felt a pair of lips kiss her neck. She hadn't even sensed anyone approaching. Relax, Yasaka-chan. She calmed down as she heard the familiar voice of her mate. His head resting on top of her own as Yasaka unconsciously leaned into him. Her own hands resting on top of his. Smells good. Yasaka wasn't sure if he was complimented her or the food, but accepted it regardless as her tails coiled around him. Oh? He moved one of his hands down and began to rub the furry appendages. Nice to see you have returned. she said softly as she moved her head to the side to look at him from the corner of her eyes. Kunou will be happy. Really? That's good to hear. His eyes moved to the food she was preparing. I see dinner is just about ready. He received a nod from Yasaka. I'll get Kunou then. I'm sure she will be happy to see me. He gave her one last kiss on her cheek before removing his arms from around her. Naruto stood before the door leading to his daughter's bedroom. It was directly on the opposite side of their own, allowing quick access in case something would happen, though he had placed both a security and silencing seal on their doors, allowing only someone of his or Yasaka's blood to enter. He knocked twice before waiting for it to open. He didn't have to wait long though, as he could hear small footsteps coming from the other side of the door. Yes, Kaase Kunou stopped mid-word as she saw that the person in front of her was not her mother. "Tu-san?" the small girl asked with a tilt of her head. "Tu-san." She jumped at him, wrapping herself around his leg. Naruto laughed at her antics as he tried to remove her from his leg. "Come on, Kunou, Ka-san has finished making dinner." It seemed to work as she loosed the hold she had on him and looked up. "Really? What did Ka-san cook?" A glint appeared in his eye, one that she easily remembered. "Ramen?" she asked, unsure of herself. He nodded. "Ramen." Father and daughter stared at each other for a moment before Kunou was off, running as fast as her legs could in hopes of reaching Yasaka first. "See you there too, San." He watched the spot she previously inhabited before snapping out of his stupor. "Ah, Kunou, come back here!" as he hurried up after her. "Care to repeat that, Inu?" The voice of Tsunade was heard as she looked down at the kneeling figure of one of the many Umbu members. "Hi Hokage-sama. We found the location the chakra spikes were felt from. Once there we spotted Uchiha Sasuke floating in midair with a large purple warrior surrounding him. We saw him staring at another person. This one was hovering in the air with something we weren't able to identify." "I see," she murmured as she listened to Inu's report. She only knew of one person that would make Sasuke pull out his Susanoo, but it couldn't be him, right? "Inu, can you describe the machine the other person was using?" The person Uchiha Sasuke was talking to was floating on from what it seemed like a golden-colored aircraft. "I'm sorry Hokage-sama, but I'm not sure what it was aside from the fact that it had a golden color." "That's alright, Inu. I want you to collect Minato along with Kushina in my office as soon as you can." "Very well. Should we give them a message?" "Yes, tell them we have a hint regarding their son, Naruto." If the masked Umbu was surprised he didn't show it. "Hi Hokage-sama." With those words the man was gone, leaving Tsunade in her office alone. "What caused you to come back here?" Naruto Tsunade couldn't help but ask herself. Before he left he had insulted them along with their way of life, telling them that they were no different than a rabid dog, only good at killing and causing more destruction wherever they went. So the question was, what could cause Naruto to return to the place he hated with all his heart? It was left unanswered as seconds later a yellow flash appeared inside her office, signifying the arrival of both Minato and Kushina. "Is it true?" was the first thing that was said as Kushina and Minato both wore serious expressions. They stared at each other before eventually Tsunade nodded her head. "Yes, it is true, those chakra spikes we felt the other day came from Sasuke and Naruto." "Really? What was he doing back here?" "We're not sure." Umbu reported that they saw Sasuke with his Susanoo floating in the sky, seemingly conversing with a person on a golden-colored aircraft. She gave knowing looks to both parents that she knew it was Naruto. "I know you probably want to look for Naruto, but we both know he's long gone." Umbu said he seemed to vanish in midair. "Sounds similar, no? However, just because we can't find Naruto doesn't mean we can't go after Sasuke. After all, it's possible that he's the missing piece needed to reach wherever the Gaki is located." "So, what do you want us to do?" Kushina asked her. "I want you to collect Nami and be back here in an hour. I'll get Umbu to collect me the rest of the rookies who are willing to look for Sasuke." With that command the couple left to inform their daughter of the information they just received. "Umbu," Tsunade commanded as two kneeling figures appeared. "Orders, Hokage-sama?" "I want you to inform the remaining of the rookies along with Kakashi to be in my office in an hour exact. Be sure to tell Kakashi that I won't tolerate his tardiness." Having said that they left without a trace, allowing Tsunade some breathing room. End chapter. What if Naruto Gate of Babylon High School DxD? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.